foster them?
We worked with a real Rottweiler rescue out of Cleveland. We did a lot of volunteering and helping transporting. They do great work, mostly with large bully breeds, obviously with the name Real Rottweiler Rescue.
Okay.
So, you know, we had been doing a bunch of stuff. They're always looking for places that you can, you know, short term, you know, adopt, you know, while they're looking for permanent homes, because they would vet everybody before they would place dogs in homes. And so we were like, oh yeah, we've got the room, we've got the space, we've got the experience, it'll be fine. And, you know, so we would let one stay for a little bit, and then you get attached, you know, and then between the boys and then the wife, and it was like, well, you know, we've got room and we've got space, and, you know, they're not finding a home real fast, so we'll just keep them. And it's like, you know, it got to the point where, so right now we have 6 of the 7 are like 9 to 12 years old.
Okay.
You know, so, and then we've got a 3-year-old that's like
just
you know,
riling them all up all the time.
Exactly. So it's been great for the older dogs because, you know, there's that constant ball of energy. And so they take turns on who's entertaining the young one. But yeah, so we finally had to put a kibosh on the whole. We can't short-term foster. We'll still help with transporting and doing some driving here and there, and, you know, doing their fundraisers and stuff like that. But we need to find somewhere else to park them short-term because we don't do short-term.
Welcome to the night zone. Hear the warriors speak. Life's the battlefield, and we ain't feeling weak. From love to the game and the power we seek. Our voice is strong, breaking every peak. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Protect and provide, we're knights in the fray. Nothing off limits, we got something to say. Life and love, fitness and fight all day. Guys Night Podcast, let's ride the wave. Politics and prayers, ain't no subject we shun. Keep it real, keep it raw till the battle's won. Fitness tips to faith, every topic under the sun. With honor and valor, every man's battle begun. Warriors with word swords through the air. Every point sharp and every talk fair. Knights at the round table, come and pull up a chair. Join the brotherhood, words laid bare. Protect and provide, we're knights in the fray. Nothing off limits, we got something to say. Life and love, fitness and fight all day.
All right. Let's get this thing started. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Guys Night Podcast. With me, of course, is always David. What's up, man?
Hello, sir.
That's it. Hello, sir. Yeah.
Sir, hello.
And I am, of course, Will McEwen. And after having the representative or the city council president on a couple of weeks ago, John Coyne, we figured, you know what, we might as well get a little bit more involved locally. So we were fortunate enough to have Justin Perolli, trustee of the Lafayette Township, join us. What's up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I'm excited to have you here and learn a little bit more about the process, because I'll be frank with you, this shows how I spend more time with national politics than I do with local. And when Coyne was on, he started talking about, you know, working with the townships and things like that. And I did not realize that there's 3 people as the trustees and majority rules, and that's how all our money's spent.
Pretty much, yeah.
And I was like, wow, who are these 3 people and what do their houses look like? I need to know immediately. But I mean, you guys are responsible for essentially everything that goes on within the township. There's no mayor. It's just the 3
Correct.
Trustees. And you guys don't have a city council or anything like that. So it's just you 3, right?
Well, there are 4 elected officials within each of the 17 townships in Medina County. And then there's 1,307. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's, you know, statewide. So you have 4 elected officials that run a township. And I did catch the interview that you guys did with Coyne. And kind of like he mentioned, they have the mayor and then the city council kind of that operate and kind of administer the business of the township or of the city. The 3 trustees basically handle all of those functions. And then there's a fiscal officer, or formerly known as the clerk, that is responsible for actually managing the money. Or maybe I shouldn't say managing it, because again, the spending decisions, and how that's run is responsibility of the trustees, but the fiscal officer is responsible for actually keeping track of it. He or she will write all the checks, receive all the money, make sure the books are all good, make sure that the trustees are following the proper procedure in most cases, because there's certain things that have to be done for, putting levies on the ballot, which control the revenue, how all the money comes in and out of the township. And that really falls on the fiscal officer. So four elected officials, they're all on 4-year terms. 2 trustees are on 1 cycle. That's the cycle that's going right now. So you see like all the townships around, it's all trustee races.
Sure.
There's a handful of fiscal officers on the ballot, but those are all partial terms.
Gotcha.
And then like I was elected in 23 for a term starting in 24. That'll run 24, 25, 26, 27, on the ballot again in 27. The fiscal officer and 1 trustee in each township will be on that cycle.
I got you. So it kind of rotates so that you're always kind of rotating somebody in and out of that section. Well, at least attempting to.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, if that was the mindset behind it or not, but ultimately, you're looking at a situation where if you had all 4 positions on the ballot at a time, and you might be having 4 brand new people walk in. Prior to running for and winning the seat as a trustee, I had served on the Board of Zoning Appeals for about 7 years.
Okay.
So I had some experience around local government and kind of how that worked, but it was still a massive learning curve, no matter how much you think about, kind of what you're going to be getting into when you do that. There's just a ton of stuff to learn. So, if you were to walk in with 4 brand new people trying to run the township, it would be
chaos.
It'd just be a massive challenge, because again,
continuity would be the biggest challenge, right? Because for 4 brand new people, like you're literally, the last day of the last admin, like everything just ends, and then day 1, everything starts again. So so you get continuity that way. That makes sense.
So, all right, you were elected, you said in 23. So for the 24 years when you began, what does it look like when you become trustee? Like, does somebody come up and be like, "Hey, by the way, Justin, here's a book of all the stuff that's going right now. Good luck." Or
kind of. Yeah. It's like, here's the keys to the building and everything, and have at it.
No transition team like the president of the United States gets, nothing like that.
No. And everywhere's a little bit different. Each year kind of starts off the same for each township, in the sense that there's a organizational meeting that's run, and that's kind of where everything's set up for how the new administration. Obviously, every other year it's the same 4 people, hopefully. And then, well, unfortunately, sometimes you have resignations. We just had one in Lafayette. Our fiscal officer resigned at the end of June this past year. So we went through the process of appointing a short-term, an interim fiscal officer, and that's why we have 2 trustees on the ballot this fall, and then also the fiscal officer for the remainder of that term.
Gotcha.
And I think there's 3 or 4 countywide that are doing that. But you sit down at the beginning of the year with your organizational meeting. You set out, here's how we're going to kind of administer the business of the township. We're going to meet on this schedule. We divvy up responsibilities. Every township's a little bit different, but like for Lafayette, we have our own fire department, fire district that services the township of Lafayette and the 2 villages, Gloria Glens and Chippewa Lake. So we'll have a liaison from the Board of Trustees that works kind of, doesn't replace the board, but we'll work more hand in hand with the fire department on the day-to-day needs and take those to the board when there's a full meeting. And so we have, for the fire department, we have a contract with the city of Medina, who provides policing services in Lafayette. So we have, a liaison that's in charge of that. We have zoning, economic development. We work with the county economic development. I know John had spoken to you guys about that too. That's, a big benefit for a lot of the townships to help try to bring in, business to help offset the tax revenue that, winds up typically coming from all of us homeowners.
Yeah, of course.
So you kind of set up the beginning of the year, you divvy up responsibilities, so that somebody's kind of responsible for taking lead in each of those areas. and then, you kind of go from there. But yeah, to your point, it really is all right, it's your show now,
Yeah.
or at least you're one of three, kind of get after it.
And so before you went for, and we'll get into kind of what led you into that transition, but before you worked in the zoning office, you said for 7 years. So essentially you're the guy that if somebody wants to build a barn on their property or somebody wants to do something like that, they're coming to that office, or are you more like new development coming in, or what was your responsibilities then?
So zoning at the township level, everybody will do it a little bit differently, but typically you have a zoning inspector. And that would be I think what you were describing. The person that would be responsible for reviewing a new application. Somebody wants to build something,
Right.
You want to split, just anything that you want to do with that would start with the zoning inspector. What I did is there are 2 boards of township residents that serve to assist in the zoning process. You have your zoning commission, which is a 5-member board.
Right.
And they are responsible for kind of reviewing the zoning code. If there are any changes that need to be made,
Or
any modification.
variance or anything like
Well,
that.
and the variance is the Board of Zoning Appeals. So there's 2 separate boards. The Board of Zoning Appeals, that's the one I did, and that is the variance, right?
Okay.
So you have the Zoning Commission, which is responsible for, helping to draft the code and kind of the long-term vision of what the residents want to see from that. Each of those board members is appointed by the board. They are on a 5-year cycle. So you serve a 5-year term. There's 5 of them, and then there's one that's kind of rotating each year. So, and then the Board of Zoning Appeals is where anytime there's a gap, right? Somebody wants to build something, but it doesn't quite fit the code. And is it because the lot's goofy? We've had some where, I'm trying to think of a good example, but you might have one where there's a lake that's like taking up a big portion of the property. So like they want to expand or they want to do something additional, but that's getting in the way of them being able to conform with setbacks or something along those lines. So they'll bring that issue to the Board of Zoning Appeals. There's a public hearing that's held. It's announced to the public, hey, this is what we're reviewing. They're actually meeting tonight. The Board of Zoning Appeals is hearing a variance for, I believe it's a shared driveway situation. And it's a type of thing where it's not something that's typically permitted by the zoning code. So this is a situation where, we have a board of residents that have been asked to serve the community and say, hey, is this a situation where an exception makes sense? Does it still meet, with what we're trying to do from a zoning standpoint?
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to infringe too much on private property rights if you can, so that's what that process is. And that's what I did for 7 years.
Okay. Yeah, I just went through that process last year, actually, when I built my barn, because where I wanted to put it, I had to get a variance for close to the neighbor's property or whatever. And it's funny because our bylaws in this development changed drastically about 2 years ago. I don't know if it was light enough when you pulled into the development, but did you see that barn on the left side? So that doesn't follow any of the bylaws. But at that point in time, if you attach it to your house, you were good to go.
Okay.
So
that was your HOA?
We don't have an HOA. It's like bylaws for the community
Okay.
or whatever. But essentially, like what it said was if it was attached to your primary structure, then
Do whatever you want.
you didn't have to go by like the size rules, the variance as far as the property lines, et cetera. So they built this astronomical barn, and then they connected like this huge walk-on way over to their house, which was like a huge. I don't care. The way I always looked at it is like, I grew up in Lafayette. Like your property is your property, whatever. But apparently, like 50% of the development did not like it. So they got something changed in the zone. I want to say like the bylaws were changed somehow. I don't know if it has what the process. In fact, what is the process for that? So if there's a big complaint like that and the zoning commission decides that there needs to be some change because other people are going to start taking advantage of this, what's the process to make that change?
Well, there's a couple of different ways that you can initiate one of those changes. It can either come from the actual zoning commission themselves. They can initiate the process. It can be something where the Board of Trustees says, hey, we've been hearing from residents and we want to do X, Y, or Z. So the Board of Trustees can ask the zoning commission to kind of start the process. Or a resident can come in, or a group of residents can come in and say, hey, we don't like that X, Y, or Z is being done, and we'd like to see you make a change, and here's what we propose. So the zoning commission then will review what's being suggested, and then they will pass, they'll take action to kind of start the process officially, right? They'll accept that in, and then that goes to the County Planning Commission. They review it just to kind of double check if they have any feedback to give, right? So they'll review, they'll make recommendations, and then there'll be a public hearing that'll be held. The Zoning Commission has to hold a public hearing where they review any of the changes, solicit feedback from the community, and then the Zoning Commission can either, adopt it as is. There may be recommendations that come back from CPC, the County Planning Commission, that say, hey, we had one where we were doing changes to solar panel language. And one of the things that was originally written in was like glare restrictions. And they're like, hey, in our experience with what we've seen in other areas, it's really hard to police glare, right? Like, how do you define it? How do you, so they're
Where
like,
are you at when the glare gets you in the eye?
So it was like, hey, you should strike that language from it. So the Zoning Commission would, they removed it, and then they would pass, and they would say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then they send it to the Board of Trustees, who ultimately have to hold another public hearing. Same process. This is the language that's being presented. The Board of Trustees has kind of the final say, at least as far as like the township government goes, because again, once the trustees would make a decision to either approve, to move forward with it, there's a 30-day period where it's open to the public. If enough people don't like it, they can actually petition to put it on the ballot and referendum the change. So ultimately, just like so much of the rest of our government, the power really resides with the people that live in the township.
They just have to be paying attention.
Correct. And that's
what I was going to ask you. The next step is like, I mean, how often do you actually have people involved in these different things? Because unless it's involving them directly, like for instance, when I went through my variance, my neighbors didn't even show up. And then when I built the barn, they were like, hey, you're really close to the property line. I'm like, I know, you didn't show up. I thought you were cool with it.
Yeah.
They just walked away.
Well,
but it's like, I mean, they probably got that letter and was like, oh, this is dumb, I don't need to go, whatever, and then they miss out. But like for anybody else, like I wouldn't have a clue if my township was currently passing
You
something.
should have built one of those. Have either of you ever seen that Walt Disney Theater in Los Angeles?
No.
You haven't seen that? Never heard of that? Should look that up sometime. It's that, I know you've seen it before. It's this goofy looking building right here.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So weird. You made me think of that when they talked about glare. So you laugh, but all of the businesses surrounding over there had to go in and install like super high powered HVAC systems in there to affect the cooling in their building. Like there's places on the sidewalk that have sunburn warnings at certain times of day. Like when you're walking near, you can literally feel the change in heat when you walk right by it.
That's
Really?
crazy.
You should have built your barn like that.
Just torches grass.
Yep.
That'd be great.
Take that.
But how do you guys notify everybody? I'm doing some research for the show. I've seen where you like try to post something on your post.
We
or
try
your
to put
page.
everything. We try to put it. Well, everything gets put on the township webpage or the township website. We have a electronic sign out front of the Safety Services building on Wedgwood. It gets posted there. We do post in the paper. Still, especially for any of the zoning type stuff, it's always in the paper. But I mean, at this point,
Yeah, who reads the Medina Gazette?
right?
Well, I think
Especially
that's,
their
oh yeah, their
rhetoric lately.
distribution of all 8 senior citizens that read it.
Yeah.
No offense.
And then depending on what type of change is being done, you typically are required to notify any of the contiguous property owners.
Right.
So they get actually a letter in the mail that says, this is what, they get a copy of, if it's a variance, they get a copy of the variance. If it's a amendment to the zoning, they'll get typically zoning amendments are wider than just that small amount. But they would get a letter in the mail that says, hey, there's going to be a public hearing at this time. If you have anything that, that's the time to kind of come let people know what your concerns, issues, thoughts are on it. And, to your point, most of the time when it's like a variance type situation, a lot of times the neighbors have already typically talked,
Right.
hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. If there's going to be a lot of objections, they usually work it out like, oh, I think that probably encroaches too close. If you could do this. And it's usually a very collaborative process. So we typically find that like especially with variances, there's very rarely a lot of pushback, especially since it's,
Yeah.
it's just the people that are right there. When there are things that are more zoning for the whole township type stuff, or we have Innovation Park technology park, where the fire department, where the new building was built. We have the University of Akron has a facility back there. There's 2 or 3. There's 3.
Gosh, I didn't even think about that. When you mentioned fire, I
Yeah.
totally forgot about that. They moved over to that huge building on 162 over there.
So there's 5 parcels in there that make up Technology Park, and that's always been kind of that's drawn a lot of attention. So when stuff comes up around there, we tend to get a lot more people that come in and want to express their concerns over that, because there's just been a lot of changes, just in the world in the last 20-ish years, and that the vision for that area is probably never going to what it originally was is probably never going to be seen. It was more to be
What was it originally?
Well, you had the University Center that was in there,
And that was University of Akron, like a satellite office,
Yep.
right? And that's still there, correct?
It's still there, and they're actually the county has a lot more work. There has a lot more. The Career Center is starting to use that for some of their adult learning type stuff. Medina County Sheriff's Department and the county uses it for a lot of like different types of training classes. I think I just saw the county commissioners, I believe, within the last couple meetings, we're talking about doing a expansion to the garage for some additional storage, especially since the Sheriff's Department just built their outdoor range in Lafayette Township. Yeah,
did they really?
Yeah.
Where's
It's over
the range at?
you know where the highway engineer is off of 162 behind the county home?
Yeah.
That's where they've got their outdoor
Really?
gun range. That just opened up this fall. So, I mean, there's a lot of county activity within our township. And so it makes sense for them to be able to use that facility, because the University of Akron never took off the way that they thought it was going to with the use of that satellite office. And the hope was that the rest of that area would be similar,
Right.
Office space, little bit lower impact from, commercial trucks coming in and out. I mean, that tends to be the one thing that gets a lot of attention from people is hey, are we going to have a ton of truck traffic coming in and out of there? You already have the state route that runs through there, so you have a good amount of that as it is. So people start to get concerned. Well, since we're not going to see, it doesn't look like we're going to see that type of development in that area. What are we going to get there? And so it's just like anything. Until something is done, it's always what's, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
what's it going to be? And then everybody's kind of, weighing in on kind of what they'd like to see. And I think, it's tough because we have a very rural township, for the most part. That section outside of the city, it's all residential. There is not a ton of commercial. We're not like Medina Township or Montville Township, where they have a huge, commercial base that's grown up around the city. We just don't have that. So you get a lot of people that would like to see, let's just keep the residential. But then you have that buffer. We've got that buffer up against the city that's kind of quasi.
Are you talking about up on 42 or a 162?
Along Ryan Road.
Yeah.
So originally, way back in the day, Lafayette Township actually extended almost into the fairground.
Oh, did it really? Up to 42?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so you've had a lot over the years, and this is where zoning gets to be such a kind of a hot button issue and so important to the livelihood of a township. That whole industrial district there on Lake Road. So
The post office is back
where
there.
the post office annex is. You've
Sealy
got
is there.
Carlisle, Sealy, all that was Lafayette Township.
Oh, wow.
And I want to say it was in the 50s is when a lot of that was being done. And the leadership in Lafayette Township was like, look, we don't want that. And it's not going to be built there. And unfortunately, they were right in that it wasn't going to be built in the township. But because the owners of that property wanted to have it built, they just annexed it to the city. It became part of the city. It got built right where we didn't want it.
Wow.
Where the leaders at the time didn't want it. And now it's part of the city as opposed to the township. So all that tax revenue.
It's tax revenue goes to the
Right.
city. It's part of the city, but
It's still right
realistically,
there.
It's like so far out of the city. It's not part of the city. That's interesting actually. And that shows kind of how things like that can happen, because when you say the owner, the gentleman who that owned the property, 7 years ago, that's private property, you can annex your land to the city.
100%. It is the annexation rules it's very clearly spelled out. I can't cite them to you. So,
Right, yeah, it's
but
okay.
if you Google them, you'll find them. There's, I believe, 7 criteria that as long as your parcel meets those 7 criteria, nobody has any say in it other than the property owner.
Wow.
The city doesn't get to make a decision. The township doesn't get to make a decision. They just do it. So it has to be an adjoining, one of the main pieces is it has to be an adjoining piece of property.
And I figured that would be one of the 7 things. Hey,
Right.
Evan, how's it going, buddy?
So since it has to adjoin all those adjoining parcels, if you're the leadership of the township and somebody comes to you with something that's maybe not ideal or perfect for what you want, you kind of have to at least open a dialogue with them and say, okay, is there a way that we can solve this problem or this issue without just having the property, annexed
Right.
to the city? Because then what it does is now the next parcel, the next
do the
big
same thing.
farmland can do the same thing. So what I was talking about with the buffer is you have Dover Highlands, Ryan Farms. There's a couple of housing developments that are along Ryan Road.
Mm-hmm.
And they became a point of contention for a lot of people in the rural part because the rest of the township is 2-acre lots. And here are all these housing developments that are popping up and people are like, why? That doesn't jive with what the rest of the township is. And it's, well, those are all those adjoining parcels that could just annex to the city. You lose the revenue. Then they can also develop it, whatever the city's rules are for density. By working with the property owner before he sold to the developer, or working with the developer that wanted to buy it, we were able to, or previous administrations, this was long before my time, were able to kind of figure out a way to develop those at a way that satisfied the desire of the developer, but also was in line, or at least more in line with what we would want to see in the township. So now those get developed out, and you've kind of created a barrier
Right,
to
yeah.
further annexation. Because if you look around the state, there's some great examples, but there are townships that have just been gobbled up by cities through annexation that ultimately the townships either get eaten completely or they lose so much of their land that they're not economically viable. They can't provide any services. Because that ultimately, comes down to what's our biggest job as trustees, right? Is providing the highest level of services that we can to our residents, but doing it within a budget that makes sense so that you're not, taxing the crap out of people, which
Right.
I think we're all dealing with.
Thanks, Montville.
Well, yeah, you do have it the worst.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, not anymore. We've caught up to you,
Really?
here recently with some of the different things. Well, we just passed a large tax levy last fall for our
School.
fire district. So,
Well, actually, let's go back before we get into the levies
fine.
for the fire district. Because you touched on so many different
sorry.
things. No, it's
Love it.
great because
Yeah.
it's awesome information. And for those listening, I didn't know about half of that stuff. So I guess I would say, first of all, the leaders of Lafayette Township years
Mhm.
ago, they were probably right in not putting Sealy in that where they went, because you look at it now and it takes up so much space for development.
Mhm.
And on top of that, those aren't exactly areas, those are businesses that are disappearing in a sense,
Yeah.
or not hiring as many people as they might have been 30 or 40 years ago. So then they become abandoned buildings and abandoned. So I could say they probably saw the writing on the wall.
What about if you're a decision maker, and let's say, because I think with that, then all of the Dow Corning property would have been also pretty close
Mhm.
to the township. So what about them? What would you
Down
think?
Corning.
Yeah. Oh, they make
Where's that at?
roof shingles and
Yeah,
whatnot.
I know Corning.
Yeah, they're
Where-
on Smith. They're right next to the fairgrounds.
Yeah, that
Yeah, but
would have been Lafayette as well.
Township as
way
well.
way back when,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
West Smith is the buffer. So once you're out on West Smith, see if I'm good with my directions here. The south side is
Mhm.
Lafayette Township. The north side is York Township, and then the city kind of sprawls out from
Right,
where the
all
city
over.
is. But those are kind of the that's our neighboring township is
Gotcha.
York. So
Yeah, the downside is no matter what, you've lost all that tax revenue.
That's the huge thing,
I mean,
in my
that's
opinion.
a ton of revenue that you lost over the course
Massive.
of 75 years, especially. So I guess before you started doing all that, what got you into local politics in general? Like, what made you say, like, oh, you know
take
what?
us way back, like rewind, because I know you grew up in the area.
I did.
too,
I
right?
did.
Yeah.
I grew up over on 42, right next to Richardson's farm.
Yeah.
I went to Cloverleaf. After
You graduate, what, 98?
96.
96?
96.
Your brother, 98.
Yep, one in 98, and I want to say the youngest was two. I always get this wrong whether Jared graduated in 99 or 2000. So but yeah. So I had two younger brothers. We all graduated from Cloverleaf. I went to school in Pittsburgh after I got done. Moved back. I knew this is where the area that I wanted to be, but there's nowhere to rent in Lafayette, and it's really challenging when you're first starting out. So my wife now and at the time, we were living together, and we we rented in the city. We lived over behind the movie theaters. But as soon as we had an opportunity to buy, Lafayette's where we wanted to be. She grew up in Wadsworth, so I mean, she's from the area, so that definitely helped too. But when I came back, I knew I wanted to get involved. I just wanted to do something. I grew up, like I said, I grew up out here. My parents owned Lafayette Market for a number of years. I want to say late 80s, mid 80s. I mean, I remember, taking the minivan into Bueller's and picking up milk to load the coolers when it was an old farmhouse. That property, when they first started, when they bought the market, it was there was two farmhouses and a huge barn in the back. So it wasn't even the gas station setup that it is now.
Right.
So I mean, yeah. So my family's always had ties to the community. So when we moved back, as soon as I bought the house, I reached out to Linda Bowers, who was one of the trustees at the time, and I just asked, like, what's a way to get involved? How can I, be of service to the community and learn more about it? Because when you're young and you're growing up, like you know some of it, but you don't know a lot of those things. So she recommended zoning. And so I got appointed to the Board of Zoning Appeals in 2016.
And that's just you essentially volunteering and then them
well,
basically
it's not volunteer, but I mean, we got paid a stipend for each
Right,
meeting. But yeah, you
just raise your hand, say I want to be involved in it, and then they either appoint you or they don't. Based off of
we've been blessed the last couple of years. We've had a lot of people that have wanted to be involved in zoning, so we've had the ability to actually make some choices. A lot of townships don't have that. It's usually trying to convince somebody that you want to deal with this, because from a zoning commission standpoint, I think they have in a lot of respects they have a much more difficult job, in the sense that they're really trying to write all the rules, try to figure out, like, how do we address every eventuality that could possibly come up. And to the conversation that we were having, like with the industrial park areas, how do you write a code to apply to the future, right? Like, nobody has a crystal ball to know what's coming down the pike. So that's tough. But like on the Board of Zoning Appeals, people are coming to you to, like, because it's like, I want to do something that I'm not allowed to do. Can I do it? So now you kind of got to look at it and go, well, I want to say yes, but at the same time, like, you can't just approve every last thing for right.
It starts looking like West Virginia.
Then you have no zoning at all anyway, right? So it was definitely a great learning experience. I think not that there's any one aspect of maybe township governance that's more important than another, but to me, zoning is probably the most involved and is the quickest one to fire people up. Yeah. Well, I mean,
put it, yeah.
The rest of it is, you maintain the roads and you take care of those. And it's not that that's not important, or that that's not, a lot of work, but
people just
how controversial is that, right? Same thing with fire service and police, and people have issues anytime you start talking about property taxes and levies and stuff like that, then people get worked up. But as far as like the actual like day-to-day functioning of it, it's pretty straightforward and cut and dry. Whereas zoning can kind of be all over the place, which is fun.
Yeah. So from a local representative, like local side of things, obviously I forgot that the fire station used to be a volunteer fire department only.
Still
Small
is
one
technically,
in the
but-
township, right? Like, or right down there across from the market.
Yeah,
matter of fact.
we have what's now kind of the service department and the administrative building where our offices are. That used to be the fire department, and the town halls in there as well. So the fire department was basically
It was
two oversized
yeah.
garage bays,
Yeah.
and a limited amount of space for those guys to be able to work and operate. And yeah, I mean, we weren't able to staff the building on a 24/7 basis like we are now.
Right.
And we didn't have the resources available to those men and women when they were coming back from calls. I want to say it was, they tried to put that levy on the ballot twice, I believe. And I think it was in 2016, 2017 when it passed. And they were able, actually, I think it was 2016.
How
when it
large
passed, but,
how large was the levy for that? Do you remember?
I think originally it was a $4 million. The actual building came in a little bit less than that. We've got 6 full drive-through bays, so you've got 6 doors on both sides. So there's plenty of room for growth for equipment and staff. There are sleeping quarters that are in that building, so that, again, like I said, we staff 24/7 now, just because the community has grown to the point where it really needs it. So,
well, I was going to say that's the other thing to look at too. You talk about not being able to see the future, but I think anybody that's in this area can see the expansion that's kind of blowing up between Route 3 and 162, right? How do you plan for that in the future? It's things like, to me, Montville Township, City Hall area, fire department, police area, and Lafayette's, I look at them and I'm like, those are atrocities. Like, we do not need these big of buildings. But then you don't realize, wow, all these developments popped up. They're building another 1,000 houses basically right here within a square couple miles. You are going to need those services.
Well, and especially for us, we talked about the fact that it's so residential driven. Those tend to be a much heavier draw on EMS and fire. And I mean, that's, you don't want to be skimping on that, and they don't schedule those. It's not like somebody's like, all right, well, I'm going to have a cardiac arrest at 4:00 in the afternoon. So, can you
the
be
truck
there?
warmed up?
Right. So we've been able to, because of a number of things that have happened over the years, we've been able to put, 3 people in that building 24/7. So that's why it's really a benefit to have the space that we have, because, these people, the men and women that work in the fire and EMT services, they typically work 24-hour shifts, and then they have other jobs as well. Because, like, for us, there's nobody. Our fire chief is the only person that's full time.
Right.
Most everybody else will work anywhere from, maybe one shift to 30 hours a week. Very rarely does anybody get over that. So they're all juggling, serving our community and working in either other departments or other careers in some cases.
Sure.
So to have that space for them to be able to, get some rest and be able to clean up after calls and do those things so that they can be ready for that is huge. So that's, and then we also have, obviously, administrative office space for the chief, for the assistant chief, for the fire department itself, and then a nice meeting space for the community to be able to use, where we hold our meetings that you've had a chance to watch.
Yeah. So, and even still, I mean, where that fire truck, I guess, what was the location? Was it based off of just that industrial or that technology park, as you called it earlier? Like, that was where it was always going to have to go. I'm just thinking, like, where Lafayette is. I'm like, man, it is still a haul to get to Friendsville Road or Kennard Road or down by Vandermark. And that's all Lafayette Township as well, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing as far as not just the amount of people, but the amount of coverage. Because if you're in Medina, like you're in Medina City, like the fire truck's driving like 4 miles. You could be driving 12.
Well, and that's where, that location probably is one of a handful that was probably where it was always going to need to be. One, you're on a state route, so you have easy access to be able to get out and get to where you need to go. 2, even though, from a geographic standpoint, it's definitely not the middle of the township. When you look at the population of our township, it's really, and where the fire district services, because like I said, too, we also service both Gloria Glens and Chippewa Lake as part of the fire district. So
is Chippewa Lake not considered township?
That's an interesting conversation in and of itself.
I
At
would
one
have that
point,
conversation,
well,
'cause
at
that's
one point it
interesting.
was,
Okay.
and they still are sort of. They incorporated. They're their own village, so they have their own village council, and they are technically a separate political subdivision. But they are also members of the township, so they do vote on the trustees. They will vote on anything that has anything to do with the fire district, especially. But they don't have quite the same status that the rest of the township does. For example, we don't do, because they incorporated in their own village, they do all of their own maintenance for like the roads.
Okay.
And so we actually just at the last one of the last meetings, we do a plow contract with them every winter. So our service department, the township service department, plows their roads, but because they're a separate political subdivision, we have to do it via contract because we
Gotcha.
can't.
Yeah. Can't share.
Yeah.
So how when did that happen? Is that recent or has that been that way for some time? I feel like it's always been the village of Chippewa.
Yeah, it's-
as long as I remember.
Yes. As far back as I can remember as
Okay.
well. I'm sure there are people that could probably answer that question better than
Yeah.
I can. But as far as I remember, they've always kind of been their own, separate, but apart.
So do they still? So instead of their taxes going, their property tax and stuff going towards the township, they go towards the village.
Most
but then
most of them.
most of them.
They do. There
is it
are
kinda like-
some property taxes that come to the township, but
Okay.
not the majority goes to the village.
So does that come back to something? What was it? Coyne was calling it the JED, essentially, which was like the joint.
Oh, that
Where-
has more to do with employment
Mhm.
and tax
Oh,
collection.
you're right. It was
for-
the other one then. What was the other one he talked about? It was where like the money was spent between the township and the city. I thought maybe not, but essentially that's what's happening. You're saying so like those property taxes that are collected in Chippewa, some of them are still going towards Lafayette Township.
Some they pay some of their inside millage
Mm-hmm.
comes to Lafayette. Most of it winds up in the village.
And then the village, then since they don't have the resources that the township has, they then pay the township to do the
Contract. It's
Contract.
kind of like we do with the city of Medina, right? Like we, way back when, we used to have our own police department.
sure.
And then it got to the point where the residents weren't, voting to approve the levies to fund the department. So we went through a process of contracting for services for police. And so it's the same type of thing. The things that the village can't manage within their own budget, or it's more efficient for them to. I do believe that they actually do some police contracting with the sheriff's department as well to add that. So it's up to their village council to decide what's the best
Right.
way for them to do it.
So they operate similar to a township then politically with the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
It's just back to the council mayor setup in the village. Kind of, they're
Gotcha.
probably closer to a city really, than a township.
just a smaller size.
Correct.
Now, how long has Lafayette been without a police presence? Has it been
Well,
longer
without
than
a
you-
presence or without a department.
Without a department.
I want to say late 2000s,
Okay.
mid
So
2000s.
looking at it from where you're at now as a trustee, have you ever looked at the numbers and seen if it was more beneficial to have a small department versus contracting out like Medina Police or Medina Sheriff? Well, Sheriff, I guess you don't have to contract out, but police you do, right?
Well,
The sheriff, you do.
so
And they used to, right? It used to be the sheriff. When I moved here, it was the sheriff's office had it,
Mhm.
and then Medina PD like undercut that contract by like a significant amount.
So that's an excellent question, and it's loaded with all kinds of
Booby
landmines
traps.
in there.
Yeah.
Well, it comes down to what do you want to see? There's trade offs to everything. The contract that we're on with the city is a 5-year contract. I believe this is the second one that's been with the city of Medina, and previously there had been a contract for services with the sheriff's department, and then obviously go further back, we had our own department. So the way that our contract is, well, I guess let's circle back real quick. When the last renewal was put on the ballot, and the trustees at the time, this was before I was on the board, but they really you've got 3 options that are viable, right? You either can contract with the city of Medina, you can contract with the sheriff's department. I guess you could reach out potentially to maybe one of the other, but for us, proximity wise, it'd be like maybe Seville or Montville. None of them are really
Yeah.
close enough, to to maybe be able to do it, and they're going to have their own issues, right? So the city and the county make most sense, or you just go back to, no policing services other than, the sheriff's department does patrol the county.
Right.
They've got cars that are out on the road, but they cover the whole county. So the board at the time said, okay, the contract that was expiring was roughly $400,000, and the city of Medina was willing to renew the contract for a flat $400,000 over 5 years. So the board then went to the sheriff's department and said, okay, if we were to give you that $400,000 contract, what can you provide for the township for that money, so that we're doing an apples to apples comparison? And the sheriff's department put a proposal together, and it wound up being roughly 70 to 75% of the coverage that the city can offer. So the city's just because of the proximity to where we're at and the way that they do things, it's
the
hard to
coverage they have to do too, right? Because like you said, the sheriffs are doing the entire county. So.
Correct. And so the way that the contract is set up, we pay $400,000 a year. That's on a separate levy for the residents to pay, and they treat the area from Route 3 and West Smith. So if you were to draw kind of like a boundary from West Smith and Route 3, and then all of Lafayette Township. So you get that little bit of area that's still technically the city of Medina, but they treat that as their southwest quadrant. And there's the plan is that there's pretty much always a car on patrol somewhere in there 24/7. And then they respond to calls in Lafayette Township the same as they do within the city. So like I remember, fairly early into the first time that the city had the contract, there was a incident at Lafayette Market, and there were 5 City of Medina units responding to the call, and that's just not something the sheriff's department just
We've
doesn't.
never done that.
They can't. It's not a fair ask of them to be able to do that. So the level of service that we get from them, they respond to all the 911 calls. If somebody, we had one, I can think of 2 perfect examples. There was a call, and this is a benefit because they are patrolling and they are out in our area a lot. We had a gentleman that had a chainsaw accident, and because of just the proximity to the call when it came in, the city PD officer was first on scene and was able to apply the tourniquet to his leg and have him pretty much staged and ready to go at the end of the street. So when the squad showed up, they were able to immediately get him in the squad. Our guys were able to do what they needed to do and transport him to the hospital. We had another cardiac arrest call where, the Medina City PD officer was first on scene and was able to start administering CPR immediately. And those are things that are just invaluable to our community. I mean,
yeah, of course.
And then to your question about, doing our own, we absolutely could. There are people in our community that have brought it up. The issue is it's going to be
$400,000,
3 times the cost minimum.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look,
$400,000 just doesn't cover anything.
It doesn't. By the time you put by the staffing, by the time you pay the guys, by the time you cover your insurance, your vehicles, your equipment, your training,
it's just like 2 guys.
Right.
It's 2 guys in a car like it was 20 years ago.
Right. And
that's
so
probably 6-fold what it costs to have it picked up by the neighboring agency.
Right. And then so like if you look, you have Medina and Montville. Obviously they're both significantly bigger townships, both from a population and a revenue base.
Right.
But they manage their own police departments, but then they contract with the city for fire. And we're kind of the opposite, right? We manage our own fire. We have our own fire district in our EMT service, which is, amazing.
Right.
But then when it comes time for that policing piece of it, the city contract, at least to this point, has been very hard to replace, both from a matching that level of service at that cost is just.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, so
it really is when you put it into perspective. Because I mean, even if you're paying somebody $80,000 a year and a chief $100,000 a year, and you buy a car, you still got to service the car. You got to pay benefits to those 2 employees, and they can't cover 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you're getting a fraction of the cost.
See, if we had kept Sealy and we kept the Corning plan and all that,
sure.
we'd be able to afford all that stuff pretty easily.
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. And the residents of Lafayette would probably be paying half of the taxes that they currently are. But
Well, so that's the next step. So you mentioned there's a $4 million levy to get the fire all built and everything, but now you have to continuously run those levies, correct? Like they expire, like that one expires, and then you have to have another one that pays the bills for X amount of years. Is that how that works?
Well, the bond for the building was set. That's a set term. So we have the term on the loan runs through 2029. So if we just leave everything alone as it is, that bond will be paid off. And once that bond is paid off and the building is paid off, then that levy goes away. We've actually had a couple of things that worked in our favor. That levy over collected because of the growth that we've seen in the township. So it's generated more revenue than was forecasted for the first couple of years. And then we also got a little bit of a break, at least on our end, for interest rates. That bond is at a 2.75% interest rate. Early 2022 rates kind of started to take off. We've been able to keep that money invested in what we're allowed to invest in as a township, as a municipality, and still earn 4.5, up to even 5% interest on that. So between those two things, we've got a decision in front of the board right now. Actually, we've put away enough money that we could cover the bond payments for next year and not collect the levy at all. But that would mean that we have to collect the levy through 2029 to pay the building off. Or we can stay ahead of schedule where we're at and potentially retire that bond maybe a year, maybe even 2 years early, potentially, and retire that levy so that tax burden on the residents goes away a little bit earlier. And that's one of those things that, winds up being a decision that the board has to sit down and look at and weigh the cost benefit analysis, right? Like, who do we want to give that, not really give that benefit to, but who do we want to reduce that burden on?
Sorry. And so in that sense, you're over collecting. So
we did. What happened?
Did you already apply that? Is that already applied or it's not applied?
The way that the loan is set up for that building is we have a set payment schedule, and we are not allowed to make additional payments unless we can retire the whole thing.
Gotcha.
But like I said, right now it kind of works in our favor anyway, because
well, as a resident, like to me, I'm thinking like, okay, well, the way rates and things are right now, I would rather take that extra money and apply it to something else because that levy's at a 2.7% rate versus a 4 or 5% rate that it might be at now.
Well, we can't do anything with that money.
Other than that levy.
As that revenue comes in, it is tied just to retiring that bond. So we can park it somewhere and earn a better return on our money, which is what we're doing. Right now, the bulk of that money is invested with Star Ohio, which is a program that's run by the Auditor of State, and they control what we're allowed to invest in, because obviously we can't go speculating in stocks and too many bonds. There aren't too many bond issues that we're even allowed to go after. We definitely can't do like crypto or any of that kind of stuff. But
Lafayette, don't worry, we bought everything that we could buy of Dogecoin.
Yep, we own Doge now.
So right now, Star Ohio, I think it's like 4.5% interest. So again, it's kind of, do we look at retiring that bond early, or do we, reduce the tax collection, again, because we could do that. We could just say, hey, instead of retiring the bond early, let's soften the tax burden right now. And there's valid arguments for both.
1 year, right?
We have the flexibility to do, we can do anything with that. Every year, usually around July, each township will do what's called a tax budget. And that's where we're supposed to be looking at what we're planning on spending the next year and what all of our levies collect. And then that's where we look at it and say, okay, we have this much money coming in. We're not going to spend it all.
Right.
Is it a situation where we're not going to spend it all because we're saving for something big down the road? Because sometimes you have bigger road projects that are coming up, or you have a new ambulance, it's $400,000, give or take, depending on how you deck it out. A new fire engine would cost us $1 million. So you do have to plan for these types of purchases. So you have to look at it and say, do we want to, collect this money and store it away for something future, or do we have the ability to reduce what one of these levies is collecting? We've been talking. You've probably heard a lot of with the reappraisals. Everybody got.
Well, that's what I was going to go next.
Yeah.
Because I saw recently Cloverleaf was actually looking at reducing their levy because of the reappraisals bringing so much more money they don't need.
Right.
So they're actually considering lowering the levy. What's that process? How's that process going? Because the school's the one who actually recommended or suggested it. Is that not correct?
Yeah. Well, what the way I understand what the schools in Cloverleaf did is they basically said, look, the way that there's two different types of levies. Well, there's more than two, but the simple way is that you have revenue that comes in that isn't capped, like our inside millage. That is just straight off of the appraised value of all of the real estate in the township. So if real estate appraisals double, we're getting double the money, plain and simple. The levies that we pass are set for like a fixed dollar amount. You'll always see that with the levy language, right? That it's going to be 3 mills and it's going to collect $650,000. So every year, the auditor's office will look at those and say, okay, based on the growth of the township, how much real estate values have changed, we're going to they'll reduce the millage so that it only collects. The goal is for it to only collect that $650, what was originally passed. So those all stay the same. So what Cloverleaf did is they have some levies that increased how much money was coming in based off of those reevaluations. And what they did is they said, okay, how can we collect the same amount of money as we collected last year? Like, what adjustment do we have to make to that tax rate to basically be revenue neutral? They didn't have anything that they needed more money for. Cloverleaf's actually been really good. They went through a long period of time of struggling. At least this is my opinion.
I mean, I was there. Yeah, I
went through a long period of time.
Started.
Yep.
All that stuff happened in like 2000.
Really struggled with those, and they made a commitment that they got buy-in on some levies, and then they said, "Look, we are going to work our tail off to manage this money properly, and whenever we have a chance to roll these back, they would." And they've done that. They've rolled back the income tax that they've collected a number of times. I want to say that started at like 1.5% when they originally passed it, and it's definitely lower than that now. And so that's what they're looking at doing. And then we've got the opportunity as a township to do the exact same thing. Most of our levies, our police levy, it's targeted for $400,000. That's our contract. So there's not much we can do with that as a standalone. Our fire district, those levies are again, pretty much set to collect what they are. But our inside millage, because of the growth of the township, because of the reappraisals, 5 years ago, our inside millage was just a little over $500,000. Next year, it's forecasted to be almost $1 million. So that means in that 5-year time frame, we're now bringing in almost $500,000 more. So how can we allocate that? Have our costs increased by that much? I mean, some of our costs have gone up. It's just what isn't more expensive than it was 5 years ago. But can we use some of that $500,000 of increase to offset some of those other levies? And if so, what's the best way to do those? Or, do we need to, save for a future,
expense?
Future expense, exactly. So it's just being able to articulate to the residents what you're doing, right? I think most people understand that it costs money to provide the services that they're asking for.
Sure.
But they just want to know that the three of us.
Well, I just want to know it's not being wasted.
Exactly.
It's like when anybody brings up the fact that like, oh, kids in Detroit don't have it as well as kids in Medina. Well, kids in Detroit are actually getting more dollars per student than kids in Medina. It's just not spent well.
Right.
And nobody's holding anybody accountable to that spend. So when people think like, oh my gosh, my property just what did we take, a 22% hike, a 25% hike? I mean, that's a lot of money to some people. For some it's $300, $400, $500 a month, and with everything else going up, I mean, I can't go to Costco and spend less than $500 fucking dollars. So everything else is going up. I mean, $300 to $400 additional taxes. Like I'm all about supporting schools. I did not vote for our school levy because I think they're piss poor managing it, and unfortunately nobody's willing to come out and say, hey, no, we're actually doing a good job, here's what we're going to do, or here's the cuts. It's always the threat of, well, if this levy doesn't pass, every single teacher's going to lose their job and your kid's going to be in a class with 200 students, and it's like the extreme worst case scenario. So then nobody believes that there's a good aspect in sight.
What is always on the ballot for levies? It's always police, fire, education. It's all the things that like are the core of what you're supposed to be doing.
Sure.
It's never, it's never the, pet project of this politician over here that,
No.
it's insane. And on top of it, the schools are in a tough spot because, a lot of that comes from Columbus.
Sure.
The state does a terrible job, in my opinion, of
dividing that up. Well, because what's it divided by, right? If it's if a less budget accountable school is doing better with their money and getting less money because of it, then they're not properly equipped for a sudden growth or boost in population, right? Because they haven't been taking more money. They're not expanding the schools every year. But then if Columbus is giving that to lesser equipped districts and they're giving, a school iPads that's got some character issues in it, and like all of a sudden students have to have 3 iPads in a year because they break them or whatever, and that's why they need additional money. Like then that's just a misuse of funds.
Absolutely. Or you have things like, when they sold us on how the lottery was going to generate all this money for the schools, and it's like, yep, great. Here's this big chunk of money, and then we're just going to pull it out of the budget over here. So it's like it didn't bring any more money to the schools. It just allowed Columbus to shift where it's at. I mean, it's kind of like, not to get too off into the weeds, but it's kind of like you hear all the talk about, the citizen-led initiative to get rid of property taxes.
Of course.
So of course, the first thing is there'll be no police, there'll be no fire.
Right.
We won't be able to do anything, and it'll
create chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Riots
and it's
everywhere.
And it's like, does anybody believe for a second that the people that are down in Columbus are going to say, you're not going to have, you don't have police and fire, and we're not going to figure out the problem if it goes away? No, you'll figure it out, because if you don't, you're going to lose your job.
Right.
So it's like, it's this ridiculous cycle of fear mongering instead of just having an open discussion over what the finances are. I mean, and I think that's the thing, one of the things that frustrates me the most with politics in general, but especially at the local level too, is, we all live in the same community, right? Like it's a blessing and a curse in that, like, all of my constituents I'm liable to run into when I go, to the grocery store,
or the one gas station in town.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's amazing because you do get to have an actual dialogue. But where I'm going with it is everybody's after the same things, right? Like we all want to be able to, pursue what makes us happy, to take care of our families, and to live whatever our life is with as little interference into that as possible. So, when it comes time to talk about money, being able to just sit down though and just put it all on the table and let people know, like, this is what we're doing, this is where it's going. Even when you do that, when you have that level of transparency, even people that don't necessarily agree with exactly what's being done can at least feel comfortable that, you're not being lied to and you're not being screwed over. Because I think that's so much of what everybody's feeling on both sides. When you talk about like national politics, is it's like we're all getting screwed, like.
Well, I mean, it's a great point. So you bring up national politics, right? Ultimately, I thought about abortion like this much in my entire life.
Right.
But because they've made it so politicized and one side has tried to do nothing but scare all of their voters into thinking that you can't go down the street and have your baby cut out of you. So it's a bad thing, apparently. Like, you know what I mean? Like they made that such an aspect of where you're sitting there arguing on the street with like a mother of 3 children, maybe even a grandchild, and she's fighting for abortion rights. And you're sitting there like, lady, like, do you even believe what you're saying? Like, no, you're so afraid of, because your party has told you to be afraid of X, that you're just out here. You would have never traded any of your kids for an abortion. So like the fact that we're arguing over this is ridiculous.
This is all modern politics, right?
But it's every aspect of it. It's like illegal immigration. Well, if you told every American citizen that they could get better health care for less money if we got rid of all the illegal immigrants, who would be like, no, save Hector in fucking Los Angeles. Like, he needs to continue and work for my uncle's construction company for $5 a day. Like, sorry, that's just not what the reality of the situation is in these politics. But because we become so bi-sided right now, where if you're a Republican and you're a Democrat, like if I side with either, if I'm a Republican, then that means I have to believe everything that you say and I have to vote every way that you vote. And we've eliminated that part where you just talked about in the local community where it's like, let's have a conversation. You know, we had John Coyne on, 27-year Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he brought up a ton of great
Yes,
ideas.
he did.
And I think that he is, I think he does have the community's best. I had, I cannot remember where it was. I think somebody commented or messaged me on Facebook and they're like, he's a Democrat. I'm not voting for him. And I'm like, that's like literally we're in Medina, dude. Like, are you fucking kidding me at this point? And then I had somebody else in my wife's barber shop and we were talking about him being on and he's like, I called him and I asked him one question, who he voted for. And he's like, because if it was for that guy that allowed for January 6th to happen. And I was like, oh my God. Like, it's like, these are regular people, but they are so fired up right now that they can just get set off on the slightest thing.
Well, there's two things that I think are important with that, right? And you highlighted it with what you said about the fact that it's like, we put labels on it. And it's like, if you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, then we don't agree on anything.
Right.
When in reality, we probably agree on like 90% of stuff, right? And maybe that's a bad example, but
it's not.
But we're so fixated on
tribalism.
we're so tribalism and labels and here's what's crazy, right? So, you know, I never really got into politics real deep until you start running a campaign and you're like, oh crap, I got to learn like kind of how to do this, right? So if Ohio's way red, right? And Medina is huge red and it's all Republicans. As far as registered voters go, if I asked you what percentage of, let's just do Lafayette Township because I actually know this one. So I'm cheating here, but what percentage of Lafayette Township do you think is a Republican, registered Republican, percentage wise?
I'd say it's probably like 65-35.
65 Democrat or 65 Republican, 35 Democrat.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to take a guess?
I think it's pretty close to even divided.
Oh, you were a little bit closer, but it's actually 66% undeclared.
Wow.
But it is about 5-1 as far as registered. It you know, the registered Republicans and the registered Democrats, you know, are hugely divided, but the majority of people aren't affiliated with either party. It's extremely independent, and countywide, it's pretty close to that.
I think what he just said is 66% of the time it works every time.
I mean, but because that didn't used to be a thing. You know, I mean, you're my age. I remember back in the day, like my dad didn't talk about who he voted for with his buddies. Like it wasn't something that, it was like,
it was boring.
It was like off limits.
And it was boring. It was fucking boring.
It was absolutely boring. It was absolutely boring.
Not
on
now.
top of that, you know, I remember my grandfather lived down in the Canton area, in one of those, you know, blue collar, you know, just house on house on house on house. And, you know, I remember spending weekends with him and he always tinkering on stuff in the garage and helping people. And, you know, he'd be helping his neighbors with this, that, and the other. And he'd be colorful language. And, you know, the guy next door was the biggest asshole on the planet and they didn't agree on anything. But then the second he needed help with anything or vice versa, it was like, but we're neighbors, and we're a community and we're going to help each other. And it's like, you know, we've really lost that somewhere along the way, this whole realizing that we're all just people. I mean, you know, even if we have ideas that are diametrically opposed, right. We can sit down at a table like this and we can have a discussion, and, you know, we may not solve any of the world's problems, but
it's just so insane how difficult that's. And look, I'm not here to say that Democrats are wrong and Republicans are right, but, you know, we've gone up a couple of times to the No Kings protest and whatever they were before. And it's like, I was truly open to dialogue. I wasn't there to tell you one situation was better, but it was like, I have 70-year-old white women telling me I'm the problem, a white man. And I'm like, what are you? And she's like, I'm a white woman. I had to wear a skirt to school. I'm like, huh?
As if that has anything
like,
to do with what's going on today.
What the fuck does that have to do with the fact you're holding up a sign that says like it's the vaccine's fault or some shit? And it's just like, we don't even know what we're arguing about anymore. We're just
Right.
arguing, and it's like nothing is getting solved at all because we're all just ripping out each other's hair and like fighting every chance that we get, while the politicians are just getting rich as fuck.
Well, not all of them.
Yeah.
But and that's what's hilarious about it too, because I can't tell you how many times, like, you know, and when I was campaigning, there was both I'll get them backwards, but it was like issue 1 and issue 2. There was the legalization of marijuana, recreational marijuana, and the abortion protection, or however it was written. But both of those issues were on the ballot. So a lot of people would want to ask about it. It's like, I'm a township trustee. We have nothing to do with any of that. Like,
Right.
we literally administer, you know, the roads and the fire service and the police, do some zoning. You know, as far as we can't make laws,
Right.
you know, we only have the powers, you know, that are given to us by the Ohio Revised Code, and they're mostly all just administrative type stuff. So, you know, but it would always be funny because people would be like, you know, well, what's your stance on this? And it's like, well, I see your sign in the yard that I just walked up, like, you know, and I'm a politician, so
Yeah.
I guess now I am. So, you know, do you want me to tell you what I really think? Do you want me to tell you what I know you want to hear, or should we just talk about what we're actually going to do as township trustees? You know, because I have no control over whether we ban abortion or allow abortion, or, you know, that kind of stuff. My job's just to, you know, kind of oversee and try to. I think John said it beautifully in his interview, right? It's just to try to make life better in our community in whatever way we can. And sometimes it's not even through legislative stuff. Sometimes we just keep people that call because they're like, hey, I'm new to the area and I don't know what I don't know. So can you point me in the right direction? And that's a great part of, you know, doing this job is getting to kind of meet. I've met so many just unbelievably interesting people that I had no idea lived in our community,
I
you
can
know, before
imagine.
doing this. And they come from all kinds of backgrounds, and none of that matters other than, you know, just building a community and providing for it. So,
While we're talking about, you know,
Mhm.
responsibilities of the trustees, and I mean, Lafayette Township, it is growing, but it's not growing as fast as, like you said, the Montville's around it. And even Buckeye School District has grown substantially because of what they are tied to Medina. But what about when it comes to like services and businesses inside of Lafayette Township? Are you guys able at all to, I mean, I know you guys don't make decisions on who comes in and who doesn't necessarily, but are you able to petition to businesses to bring things in? Like, for instance, there's nowhere to eat in Lafayette Township, right? There's a couple of bars.
Yep.
There's really nothing unless you want to go into Medina. And it's been that way for 25 years, 35 years since I've been in the area. Do you guys work with either cities or anything to that nature where you can start to kind of bring that development in? Because that area from 42 from the fair into Lafayette Township has been residential this entire time. Nobody's really expanded or done anything there. But
the biggest thing that we can do is zoning, the way that we zone it, what we allow to be built where. And then the other one is working with our partners at the county level. Like I said, you know, economic development, they do a fantastic job of working with the businesses. And, you know, Medina Township, Montville Township, they've definitely benefited from that the most recently, just because of their proximity to the city, access to get in and out, what's
Yeah, I
already
was gonna
been
say
there.
they're on
But
that
as
same
but as
line.
that's been developed, you know, we have a small pocket of area that's kind of right, like you mentioned, right up against 42 West Smith, kind of still buffering the city, that we currently have designated as an area that could be commercial or light manufacturing type development, and that's where we would ultimately, you know, have something potentially come in. We have a couple of other small areas. We talked about Technology Park a little bit earlier. That would be somewhere where some business could.
I see that coming in. That's probably 10 years down the road. But
Well,
maybe.
we've actually had a couple of people that have approached the township and have looked at, you know, our zoning commission has been working through some different language changes to be able to help facilitate some business in there. But you get a little bit of pushback from the residents around there, and rightfully so, because again, you've got some long-term residents that were kind of promised that when that was first set up, that it was going to be one thing, and it's never come to fruition for whatever reason, whether the demand isn't there for it or what. So now we're trying to figure out, like, how do we develop that area, bring in that tax base? Because again, commercial development, light manufacturing, any type of industry is going to provide a greater, economic return for the township than what they draw. You put in, a commercial facility or 300 homes. The 300 homes are definitely going to generate tax revenue, but they're also going to be a demand on services. You're going to have more calls for fire and for EMS in that area than you're going to have from, one or two businesses that locate there. So trying to balance that. And then also, again, it doesn't really matter what I think is the best thing. We have boards that are in place to help guide those decisions. And ultimately it's the residents, that we have to listen to. And that's works to be tough because no matter, I don't think there's ever been a decision that we've been faced with where we've had, 100% support.
Well, it's also going to be business development as well. So, like right now, hot topic is the Dragon Buffet, as I'm sure both of you guys have seen, right? And so the comments of people that are interesting, like, how could the city let this happen? And this guy, was notified
I wanted
on
to be
social
like, listen
media.
to the podcast. We just had this.
Yeah, we just talked about it. But I mean, so they talk about, all these different things, and they think the city has something to do with it. Like it's a grand conspiracy to, get the very, I understand they're a lovely family. They've been there forever and all of that. But like, that's a discussion between him and the prior owner of the building. Like, yeah, the people own the property, sold it. So that's not really, now, granted, they're going to have to go through some processes, but the city is also looking at, well, we got Meyer, and before that we had an empty building that guys used to break into to film YouTube videos. Like, so you have a business that opened up, and that business developer, Meyer in this case, they're buying all the old Kmart buildings out there and putting locations in. And guess what? They're putting a fucking gas station in right in front of it. This is like no mystery.
Well, I mean, frankly, Medina needs a better gas station. Why does all our gas stations seem like just ghetto as fuck? You ever notice that? Like, it's like those places where like you just don't want to go at 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, wow, how is this the case? Like, nicest town ever, and then just the weirdest gas stations.
Which gas stations are you going to?
All of them.
Oh,
it's all of them, from Speedway to Marathon.
Yeah.
I mean, the one down my house isn't too bad, but it's just interesting. Like we don't have if you go out on the 18, you have a nice get-go, and you have the True North and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know you're very picky about where you get your 5-hour energy drink.
Just
from.
roll down to Lafayette.
I've been down there plenty of times. Although the Sheets opened them up down the road, was kind of nice out in Seville.
Oh, in Seville, yeah.
But where is it going to go with it? Where are you going with that?
I know, derailed you there with your 5-hour energy shots.
I needed one right now. So obviously coming into office, and part of the reason I thought would be great coming on is like there's a lot of stuff that you've kind of brought to light that's made not so many friends in your position, or maybe it's made a lot of friends. I can't really tell.
Yeah,
which I guess is good.
I would say both. Yeah,
a
lot of attention.
Definitely a lot of attention, and I think you've made it you haven't hidden exactly who your affiliation is as far as party goes. Is the trustee a party affiliated position, or is it a non?
Well,
I mean, obviously you have your
no. There is. It's a nonpartisan position, just like your city councils and I think even mayors.
Yeah,
nonpartisan. Yep. But everybody asks.
Sure.
I've made it pretty known, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
What do you think?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. But either way,
let's do another guess.
What?
What's my party affiliation?
So you're
it's
independent, and you voted Republican.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, well, that's
you're
that's
a by the candidate type person, which is exactly what both Will and I are as well.
And actually, there will be a Libertarian Party primary in May because the Libertarian Party has ballot access. So I actually I hate party affiliation, period. I think part of the reason that you also have the 5 to 1 or whatever the crazy ratio is, I mean, at the end of the day, the Republican Party, at least around here, is more organized. And if you want a say, you vote in the Republican primary. And the second you pull a ballot in a primary, that's what you're registered to, even if you vote in the Republican primary. So I think I want to say the last cycle, the race that was most interesting to me was our state rep for District 66. So I wanted to vote in the primary because I wanted to say who the Republican candidate was. So I pulled the ballot. Now I'm a registered Republican, even though and there's no avenue to go change your party registration. It's just the next time that there's
Right.
a primary that comes out. So you either pull a Republican primary, you pull a Democrat primary, or you can go in and say, hey, just give me the levies and the issues and everything like that, and I don't care about the primary. And that's how you are technically associated. But all right, sorry. Back to the original question.
Well, I was going to say, so a lot of the noise that's been on there is surrounding maybe how money's been spent or it was in the past and some things that you've uncovered and maybe some other people have uncovered. But are you able to share any of that?
Yeah, I think that winds up being the byproduct of a lot of what winds up happening. But I think where it comes down to more than anything is I'm very much there are processes and procedures that are supposed to be in place for the way that the government's run at every level. And it's supposed to be open and transparent. And if you're doing those things, it's a lot of work. None of us at this level, none of my colleagues in our township, in the other townships, if they're doing their job the way that it's supposed to be done, are getting compensated fairly. Well, I shouldn't say that because you know what you're getting into when you sign up for it. So it's something that you're doing. But we could probably all make more money with the time that we put into it elsewhere. But that being said, I do think that there is a natural tendency to find the easiest path to accomplish what needs to be done. And if you, as an elected official, aren't going to hold yourself accountable, and this is where I will, and if the residents aren't going to hold you accountable, you can cut a lot of corners and there's nobody that's going to pay attention to what you're doing. So, I think a lot of times the conversation comes down to, oh, well, there's accusations of malicious behavior and everything along those lines. And I don't think that that's the case 99% of the time. I think what happens is people get lackadaisical in following the processes and the procedures that are put into place. In our township, and we'll actually be discussing it tomorrow morning. We have a special meeting. One of the things that's on the agenda is an OPERS issue that we had for the Ohio. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Public Employees Retirement System.
Yeah. So
I know nothing about OPERS at all.
So everybody that works for the township is a member of OPERS, and then depending on how you get compensated, some of the wages are OPERS eligible and some aren't. So if you are an hourly employee or like a salary, if you get a salary, so like the elected officials, you are a part of OPERS. Unless as an elected official you opt out, we do have a carve out that we don't have to be a part of.
All of the law enforcement and fire, it's the retirement system for the pension system as
right.
well.
So, but if you are like one of our board members that gets just a meeting stipend, your wages aren't covered. So we had an issue where we had employees that were misclassified, but for a number of years. So their wages weren't being properly reported.
That could be a big number then.
Yeah. And then what happens is if you're going strictest like to the letter on what the requirements are, there should never be a single dollar that is spent out of a township budget that should leave the township that isn't reviewed by all three trustees and the fiscal officer. Everybody should see everything. So every bill, every invoice, every payroll, everything.
So I just want to pause for just a second there, just to give a little extra context here so we all understand. Because I believe there's a state regulatory body above township trustees, right?
Okay, elaborate.
Meaning that, okay.
All right, hold on 1 second. Hold that thought. We're back. All right.
So when things go wrong, let's put it that way. I'm assuming, obviously if a crime is committed,
sure.
Even before that, right? So I think to your point, what you were saying is that
today, Junior, Jesus, spit it out. I'm just messing with you.
Wow. Remember that time I was quiet while you were trying to remember a word like 20 minutes ago? Let's edit that out.
All right. So,
okay. So, When things go wrong, so there's making an error, there's cutting corners and being lazy, there's committing a crime, and all other things, right? So obviously, if a crime is committed, you've got a county prosecutor's office, you got state attorney general's office to handle things of those nature. When people are lazy or cutting corners, that's pretty easy to expose. Like that could be handled in the next election cycle per se, if it's not where a crime has been committed. But is there also like any sort of state regulatory agency that's over the township?
Not really. I mean, we get audited.
Okay.
There's a financial audit every 2 years. That being said, I mean, we were audited for the period of time that the OPERS error was missed and it wasn't caught. And there again, we talked earlier, there's 1,307 townships. I can't even venture a guess at how many cities, villages, because they're all getting audited as well. So the state auditor doesn't even have the capacity to audit everybody. A lot of them are done by private accounting firms, and then the state auditor will work on a cycle. I want to say you can have up to 3 audits that are not handled by the auditor's office, but then the auditor will handle the 4th one. So, no, unfortunately, yeah, as much as you'd like to, I think, to your point, the best chance of accountability is either going to be the board themselves.
Well, ultimately, that's where the
or the
accountability
voters.
lies, right? Is the board. Like,
Well-
if it passes you guys, that's on you, right?
Well,
Is that a way to look at it?
yeah, absolutely. And that's why, one of the things that I've tried to focus on, and I by no means have all the answers about this. I mean, we rely a lot on the prosecutor's office. The county prosecutor is our statutory legal counsel, which means that, when we have these types of questions, right? Like what is our legal obligation? Is this an authority that we actually have? How can we address a certain situation? We talked a little bit earlier, I don't know if we did it on camera or off, but when we were talking about, some properties that maybe come up and there's some residents that have concerns over them, we a lot of times have to reach out to the prosecutor's office and say, hey, what's the scope of our authority to be able to act to remedy something? Because sometimes the answer is you have no authority and all we can do is work with our residents in trying to get the county or the health department or the building department or somebody at the state potentially to do something. But back to the question is, who's ultimately going to hold it accountable? It's really on the voters. It's on the residents and the people that live in the community, because far too often people are busy, and I get it, and they're living their lives. But if you're not going to pay attention, why are your elected officials going to go, I don't want to say above and beyond, because it should be kind of the base level, but in the private sector, I mean, and I don't know, we didn't discuss kind of what everybody does for a living, but like, when I run my own business, and so like it's got a lot of benefits and but at the end of the day, I can run things however I want to. It's my business, and I'm going to suffer the consequences of wrongdoing or a mistake, or if I screw up, it's me, it's my family. But when you're managing the business of the township, of the public, those errors are paid for by everybody, right? And
Right.
So we should be doing that, but at the same time, that's why the meetings are supposed to be open. That's why every piece of business is supposed to be discussed in open. When the elected officials are making decisions, it shouldn't be hey, this is the issue that came up. We're going to do X, Y, or Z. What's the vote? Oh, all in favor. Okay, great. It's like, what just happened? Like,
Right.
Where was the decision, the thought process? That's supposed to be open and seen. And so that's really been my push, is maybe not so much, a ton of fraud or corruption that sometimes gets thrown out, but just getting back to, best practices. What are the ways that we eliminate, like we all have other jobs. We all have other responsibilities. We all have families. And even if we didn't, even in your primary job, we all make mistakes. We all miss things. And that's why there's, it's set up to have processes where there's always somebody, kind of reviewing what's done. We talked about the fact that like every penny that comes out that goes out. I mean, the stuff that comes in, I mean, the fiscal officer handles that, and there really isn't, you know, too much of a check on that. But like when there's an expenditure or a bill that needs to go out, you know, even in Lafayette, a smaller township, you know, there might be a stack of 20 or 30 checks that need to go out in a 2-week period, you know, so while doing all of the other things that the fiscal officer is responsible for, or at least in our township is, you know, public records requests, getting information out to the residents, you know, things that they want to see, documents that maybe aren't normally on the website or available for search that way. People will ask for things, or they want clarification on something, or they want to understand something. So she's responsible for getting those out. She has to do payroll. There's just a lot of other responsibilities that come in. So, you know, processing is a bunch of checks, and the fiscal officer isn't even necessarily always the one that's made the purchase, right? Like our department heads may have done something. So yes, they submit the invoice, but the expectation is that they've reviewed the invoice and that it's, you know, that we got what we were supposed to get, and that it's, you know, that the funds are there and all that kind of stuff. So she'll be processing these. You ever sit down and, like, you know, key in a program, you know, you put in like 40 payments. I mean, how easy is it to miss a digit, you know what I mean? Or you throw one off, and then so maybe a check gets, you know, mistyped, or maybe an invoice doesn't match, or, you know, maybe some, you know, and so there's supposed to be a process where those are presented and then the board reviews them. And then at a meeting, you know, we present that list to the public and say, this is all the money that's gone out. These are all the vendors that we've paid. This is what's done. And it's easy to just kind of fall into the routine of the department's heads, you know, they've reviewed the invoice, you know, the fiscal officer is always on point, and they are 99.9% of the time. But what about that one time where there's an error and we accidentally send out a check that we double pay an invoice, or it's for the wrong amount, or, you know, just those types of things. And are they catastrophic errors? Are they things that can't be fixed? No, they're not, but they can result in late fees. They can result in penalties and different things like that. Wasted time, just, you know, just all those types of things. So trying to clean that stuff up, I think is very, very important. And, you know, I think what you see in some townships is just a difference of the approach, right? Like, should that stuff be handled all in-house and, you know, in the office without anybody seeing that process, or should that be done out in the open? And I feel that, you know, the information always gets out anyway, right? You know, especially in a small town.
Of course.
Yep.
You know, so instead of having an official story, because we've handled the business in a public setting and we've had that dialogue open and we've provided the residents with the documentation of exactly what went down, if you don't do it that way, then this person hears this story and that person hears a different story, and then there's 4 different stories. None of them are accurate. And so now there's a lot of finger pointing that doesn't do anybody any good, when at the end of the day, we could have handled it just simply by, you know, making sure all of our processes are on point and that we're doing the things, you know, that we need to do the way that we need to do them. And, you know, when a mistake happens, you just address it. You know, how did it happen? How do we prevent it from happening in the future? And how do we correct it? Boom. Done.
Everything's public record, right?
Mm-hmm.
100%. There's like, I mean, outside of like employee home addresses and stuff like that, like private information, but
they're right. Pretty much everything is going to be, everything will eventually be a public record. Some stuff can be redacted. I mean, obviously, you know, the township has everybody's social security number. You're not getting those.
Right.
You know, that kind of stuff. Yes. Personal identifying information, HIPAA stuff, you know, medical stuff that's at the township, you know, on different people. That stuff would be redacted out before you would get
business in particular, like every invoice, absolutely. Every penny, 100%. Like all the money in the bank, like all that stuff's all 100% public record. Correct. So it's real difficult for any fuckery with that, is, I guess,
as long as people are paying attention.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, like I said, that's the big thing, because ultimately it's our responsibility as elected officials to do our jobs, but who holds us accountable? The state, you know, in my experience, you know, again, the audit processes are there, and it's not that anybody's doing anything nefarious or anything along those lines. It's just that they're not going to catch every little thing. And, you know, prosecutor's office will give us guidance, but they're not going to step in and referee, you have to do things this way. They're just going to say, like, here's the law.
Yeah.
You should follow it, but nobody's going to stand there and make sure that we do. That's where it comes down to an involved community that pays attention to what their elected officials are doing, both in the way that they conduct the business and how they spend the money and how they communicate.
How do you feel? This might be a little bit of a loaded question, but let's go for it.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel that you differ from the other two trustees? Like, what's different about your, like, obviously the three of you work together, and I mean, in my mind, it's funny, and like in watching some of the meetings and stuff, I've heard like some public feedback of like, they expect you guys to be buddies and get along and drink beers together and kumbaya. But in my opinion, I think I would rather have three people that disagree on most things and discuss it. Like, that's my opinion. But so I'd just as an aside, but I guess kind of circling back to the question, like, just a self-reflection on yourself, like, how do you feel you differ from the two of them?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is what you highlighted right there, right? We do get a lot of feedback that it's like, oh, I wish you guys could all just, be friends. And it's like, why? Like, it's not about being enemies. It's not about disliking them. I don't think, I don't dislike either of them as people. I hope they don't me. But we do have disagreements on things. And I think where we really differ is that I think that, especially when it comes to township business and the way that we're going to conduct those things, like, it should be open. It should all kind of be laid out there, good and bad, and yeah, it sucks sometimes to be able to have to sit up there in front of everybody and say, like, hey, I dropped the ball on this one. Like, nobody does it on purpose. But it's no fun, to take that heat. But that's what you sign up for, in my opinion, when you're an elected official. One of the other big things that we disagree on is, and I think I probably hold a little bit of a outside of the mainstream opinion with most people in elected officials on this is, I don't think it's funny because I say that the residents need to be informed and pay attention, but by and large, I don't think that ultimately that's what they want to do with a Monday night is come to a township meeting.
No, they probably don't.
Right. So if a resident comes,
unless you're a retired 32-year-old school teacher who just wants to come fucking yell at people.
But that's the thing. But if they're going to take their time to come to a meeting, we owe it to them to have the discussions and let them see what's going on. And then if they want to speak, speak. That's we're here to listen to you. And I think too many times, it's not fun to have somebody, to stand up at the podium and tell you that they think you're an idiot, but it's going to happen, so you just have to kind of take it. And I think that's, the two big differences are, one on just really trying to hammer down, every last little thing, the details are what matter. And I don't think that the other two kind of share that same concern or that same, emphasis on those. As long as the big stuff's being handled, then maybe the details aren't quite so important. And then the other one is really just, the amount of transparency and communication with the public. I mean, I think some people would probably tell you that they'd rather I didn't communicate as much as I do. And sometimes they're probably right, in
public, or you mean like social media included? Like
social media mostly, because it does. I mean, I think we're even, no matter how aware we are of, the dangers of social media and how easy it is to just fire off a message that you would never say sitting down and talking to people. But then the other thing too is even like one of the first things that I really pushed for, and I have to own, cause I haven't delivered on it as much, but getting the pushback that I got, I really advocated for the board. We hired an administrative assistant for the township to be open for the residents to come in, but that's kind of a Monday through Friday normal business hour type of thing. And I had really advocated, like, look, we want to have the building open, and do stuff. Why don't we just rotate between the 4 elected officials and just take 4 hours on a Saturday? Yeah, it's going to suck for that Saturday, from a time standpoint, because we all have plenty of things to do our time. But isn't that what we're supposed to be doing, representing our community and be available for them to come in and talk to? And it was like, yeah, we're not doing that. And so, I've tried to always, keep open. I'll meet anybody. We have township numbers are listed online, emails on there. I'm easy to get a hold of. Like anytime, within reason, if a resident wants to meet, I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk to them, because that's how else do you know what people want? I have a lot of ideas on how I think things should be, but I'm big enough to admit that some of them are probably stupid ideas, and then, and so you sit down and you got to get that feedback from the community. And I think,
so what do you think? Because there does seem to be some people that have a disdain, hate for you.
Yeah.
And first of all, when it comes to social media, so many times I've said good intentions when I posted something, and then somebody said something and set me the fuck off. And I was like, damn it, I was trying to be a nice guy, but you know what? And then I just unleash fucking holy hell. So I can, that's probably not good as a public official. Just ask Trump, who just sent a plane pooping on people.
Well, and here's the thing, love him or hate him, and he's definitely made it a little bit easier, and I guess that's, to that point, it's kind of like,
it's not a bad thing. I mean, because you're regular people.
And that's just it, right? Like, I mean,
we have this level of like, sorry to cut you off again,
No,
but we have
go
this
ahead.
like expectation of what a politician is and how they're supposed to act. Like we look at Obama, right? He was like the statesman. He was like the ideal speaker, present, but he didn't do shit.
How many perfect people do you know?
None.
I don't know any either.
I know one.
You going religious on us here?
No. Where was that mirror? I just saw him in the bathroom.
All right. Anyway, but so the point is like we do this though, right? We expect that, we're going to elect perfect human beings that are never going to mess up, that have never made a mistake. The best lessons that I've ever learned in life were usually colossal screw ups.
Sure.
So and it's not that I'm trying to make those, but you're going to, and you're going to learn from them. And, to the social media thing, like it's crazy to think, that everybody that sits in public office, regardless of the job that they do, whether they're doing a good job or a bad job, most of that is opinion related anyway. But at some point, they put in a significant amount of time and energy and effort to earn the support of enough people to hold that office. So, this idea that then they have to have this persona where anybody can say anything that they want to them.
Right.
And we're not going to occasionally be human and say, hey, that's enough of that.
Picked the wrong day. I will not be the bigger man today.
but you know what? I do want to circle back to one thing, because I think, to the point where there's maybe a disconnect on one of the things that we disagree with. I've been doing, I obviously had an opportunity to speak to a lot of people, both in the township and just around the county. And I think public officials in general, we serve three people or three constituencies, right? I mean, obviously we all serve ourselves. Anybody that tells you that there isn't some, whether it's, your ego or the power trip or,
aspirations
or aspirations, or, it could be just simply that,
like the way it makes you feel.
Well, John sat here, Coyne, and talked about how good he feels, making it could be that, but that is still ego driven, right? But so you have yourself, you have the constituents who ultimately put you in office and who we are supposed to be supporting. And then there's a third group, which are the people that work for whatever entity you represent. And I think how you order those three says a lot about the way you lead as an elected official. To me, the constituents, the voters, the residents, whether they vote or not vote, the people that live in the community that you serve, those people should always come first and foremost. But it is very easy to put the people that work for the township or yourself, but I think most people do a pretty good job of putting their selves last, just because it kind of puts you first anyway, because that's how you get ahead. You
Right.
know, if you're out there just completely being self-serving, it's pretty obvious real quick. So it's those two constituents, or those two bases, right? The people that you are supposed to serve and the people that work for the township, or the city, or what have you. Because in the private sector, everybody expects that, you know, you're profit driven.
Right.
You know, but then all of a sudden we flip to, if you work for the government, you're not at all. Why? All these people that work full time for the city, for the county, for the state, for the township, for the fire department, for the police department, that's how they're providing for their families. Why would we ever expect them to do it any other way? And
they're not getting wealthy doing it, by the way.
no, they're not. But their interests are oftentimes competing with the interests of the constituents. And it's very easy as an elected official to serve the people that work for the entity that you're supposed to be representing.
Sure.
To garner that support. I mean, because
I could see that, because obviously those people that are in those township positions are going to help you get reelected, for one, in most cases. And then two, I mean, you see them every day. You see the struggles they go through every day, whether it's healthcare being too expensive for family or whatever. And then how do you supplement that, or how do you help them? Well, we'll just raise the taxes. Joe Schmo down the street's not going to recognize the 0.2 difference.
$3 a person in the township,
right?
You know, so you $3 here, $7 there, you know, and you start to. It's just a tough balancing act, and
Sure.
I think that's probably, you know, the other area that we maybe have the biggest disconnect is, I think, and I'm not. The voters get to decide,
Right?
You know, do you want us to serve the people that work for the township and then you, or do you want us to serve you first? And that doesn't mean you're not fair to the people that work for the township,
Sure.
you know, or the
No, of
city,
course
or anything
not.
along those lines. You do have to take care of those people, but you do have to recognize that sometimes those are competing interests, right? Like, you know,
Makes sense. Well, and the other thing too is that comes up to the voter as well when they're voting and they're looking at these different bills and laws or levies that are being passed. How specific? Because when you're at the voting booth, like, the levy is very generic, right? The description of what you're voting for is very generic. Like, oh, if you want good schools, vote for this. If you don't, vote for that. I mean, it's not. It doesn't cut and dry say that, but it pretty much says that. So how are your residents able to kind of see what's on the levy, what the specific breakdowns are, how full transparency is that levy when it's presented to the voters, and how is it presented to them?
well, that's a great question, and I think our last fire levy is a good example of that, because we were trying to do a multitude of things with the last levy that was put to our residents. You know,
And when was this? Was last November then?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Yeah, last November. Sorry. So on the ballot, we had some equipment needs. Our ambulance both of our ambulances are aging. And so we needed to plan for the purchase of an ambulance. We also have, we talked about wanting to staff 24/7, and we had been able to use some of the COVID, ARPA money, stuff like that. You know, there'd been some grants that had allowed us to expand that coverage, but the operating levy that was currently in place at the time was not sufficient to allow us to continue to do that for very long. And then there was also some talk of wanting to try to model the department after some of the neighboring fire departments, where they go to a right now. We talked about, like, the fire chief's the only full-time salaried position, and then everybody that, like, kind of staffs the building, they're all part-time. They work at a number of different departments and jobs. And so we were looking at going to a hybrid model where you would have some people that would actually be full-time, that this would be their full-time job, benefits, retirement, everything along those lines. We have some neighboring departments that do that. And so the thought was that if we wanted to go that route, again, totally different cost structure. You know, if you're just paying somebody hourly, even if you're paying them a higher hourly rate, if you're not paying, you know, a pension into their retirement fund or health benefits. I mean, right now, the cost of a family health care package through our township is almost $30,000 a year. So, you know, you can pay a part-timer even if we paid them $30 or $40 an hour,
Yeah,
you know,
you're not going to pay
you're
that.
not going to come anywhere close to what you're going to have to pay. So we were looking at doing all of those things. And to answer your question, those, you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can draft a levy to do that. So one of the things that we had considered was the staffing piece of it. That's going to be a cost that's going to go on in perpetuity forever. So we had talked about potentially carving out a levy that was going to be just for that dollar amount and was going to be a permanent levy. And then the ambulance, which we knew was a fixed cost, that we knew, you know, here's, if we collect, you know, $50,000 over 5 years, it'd be a little more than that, but you get the point. Like, we could do a 5-year levy just for that. And so you can get very specific with with any levy and say, this is exactly what we're going to do, or you can be open-ended. What we ultimately settled on was just, for simplicity's sake, I think is what was the driving force behind the decision, was we're just going to do a 5-year, I think it was a $2 million levy at the time. And that's going to cover. And then in the language, it's like, you know, it's going to cover staffing, operational costs, equipment. And so to your point, you know, and one of the reasons I had pushed back against that idea was I think it just left it wide open, right? Because ultimately now, as long as we spend the money on anything to do with the fire department, even if we switch what the plan is, like,
well, I was going to say, it doesn't lay out the plan. So, like, what am I paying for the staffing? Am I paying for the status quo of what's going on now? And then you're buying $1 million ambulance instead of a $500,000 ambulance, because there's no way for me to control that fund. I think that's where government in general has become such an issue, is all these bills get passed, they get all this stuff thrown into them, and then it's like, well, this is $160 million for the taxpayers that we're going to give them for stimulus checks or whatever, and then like we get 50 million, and then the other 110 million goes to Fugazi.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
yeah.
So when it comes to a generic bill of any kind, it's the first thing that everybody thinks of is like, how am I getting screwed? And most people aren't going to take the time to read the details in the fine print.
No, and that's
or go back and check on it.
No, and you do ultimately, you know, to me, it's a problem that's kind of baked in, because you do have, you ultimately, you know, when you get elected, you're going to be on a 4-year term. So if you pass a 5-year levy, you may or may not be here to deal with what happens after it. And that's, you know, what you see with politics at all level, right? Is don't worry about how your decisions impact what's going to happen in the future. Just solve it for now. And I mean, that's not the worst solution all the time, but when you don't look forward, you know, that was, you know, one of the things I know, Chief Kavanaugh and I had some great conversations around it, but it was one of the reasons why I was kind of pushing. It's like, you don't know what this, like, for the staffing piece of it, right?
Right.
You know, if this levy that we passed to be able to staff 24/7 with 3 people in the building, which is a benefit for us in case there's multiple emergency calls that come in at a time. Doesn't happen too often, but if it does, you don't want to not be able to respond, you know.
And 3 people is not that many.
No, and
you can't even staff a fire truck at 3 people.
Well, and fire's a whole different story, because ultimately you can't. You're right. Even at our peak staffing, which, I mean, during the course of a day, you know, if we have an assistant chief that works during the core hours of the day as well. So even if chief, assistant chief, and our 3 staff people are there, the 5 of them still can't fight a fire all by themselves, which is why mutual aid throughout the county is so important, because there really isn't a department that is fully equipped to be able to fight a fire completely on their own. We have to help each other out. You know, and that's why so many of these different agreements are so good. But
we've been out with the all hazards team too at their training as well. So yeah, we've seen that in action. Understand how that works.
Yeah, because that's across. That was
it's the whole county.
5, yeah, I was gonna say that's multiple departments all over the place
to be able to handle like big event type responses.
Yeah,
but to that, you know, so one of the things that could have been done with that levy is, you know, if with the way that we structured it, you're not going to have to go back to the voters in 5 years and say, hey, in order for us to keep doing this, you're going to need to, you know, renew this levy.
Right.
And
versus the initial, which was unlimited for the staffing portion.
Correct. And if you break it up, and like you said too, because some people might say, hey, you know, maybe they don't care about the staffing level, but they know that we need the equipment, or vice versa. Or to your point, even just there's that transparency. And like we talked about with the bond fund, right? We have that money coming in. And yes, there are some things that we can do with it to maybe manage it differently to be able to hopefully pay it off earlier or do something like that. But those funds are restricted. We can't do anything with that except for that bond. So if we did something where we said, hey, this is an ambulance levy, that's it. That's all we can do. The voter knows that if you give us this money, that's what we're doing with it. There's nothing else that we can do with it. So, and there's benefits to both, right? Like there's the more flexibility you have in how you handle your funds, the more you can do. But do the residents want to give us that flexibility all the time? And I think sometimes they do, and sometimes, I guess it just depends on the situation,
on how serious it is, and if it's on their forefront. At that moment.
And how much we've done to build that trust, right? Like if I've always done, or we as a board have always done what we said we were going to do, then you're going to be a lot. We talked about public records, right? And the things that people might ask for. Again, that's another one of those ones. Do you think people really want to see all the documents? No. They ask for the documents. They ask for things when they're not quite sure they're getting the whole story. Something just seems off, and so they want to get to the bottom of it. So if we're doing our jobs and we're being transparent and we're presenting things in a way that there really isn't a reason to ask questions, then it actually makes our jobs significantly easier than constantly handling, all of these inquiries because people don't believe what they're being told at the meetings. And that's not directed at any one person. That's the responsibility of any elected official.
Right. Last thing, when you ran, what did you run on? What is the trustee? Because you see all the signs, but at this point, I feel like it's a popularity contest based off who knows who you are and who doesn't.
That's a big part of it.
Because otherwise, I don't even know. I forget who the guys are running for Montville Township, but I don't know who they are. I haven't seen anything that they've
seriously
done. Yeah.
You're the guy I was talking about.
I know.
Not being educated.
You're right. No, and I'm aware of it.
It's Jeff Brandon, Alan Beal. They're your incumbents, and Skidmore. I forget
Skidmore. I know his
first
Skidmore.
name, but yeah, they're your three choices, and I'm going to leave it at that.
No. But it's one of those things. It's like I don't see them out there campaigning. Like I would have no idea, and it's like until last week I didn't realize that I had three people that were responsible for every dollar in Montville Township, which is a fucking lot of money. I would love to see what Montville Townships.
It's public record. Go find out.
Yeah, it's just one of those things.
I know it's more than $10 million.
Here, I'll look it up right now while you're telling me that. But either way, what did you campaign on? How did you even campaign?
I did a lot of door to door. I did a lot of social media, for better and worse. But no, it was a lot of just getting out door to door, putting out. For me, the biggest thing was fiscal responsibility. Our township has grown significantly, at least for us, over the last 5 years. It's brought in additional revenue. All of the levies have over-collected a little bit just because there's, we talked about the process of rolling them down, and the auditor just can't always keep up with the growth as new building comes in, and we've seen a lot of it compared to what we've seen in the past. And then one of the big kind of like hot button issues was, even at the busiest, I would be hard pressed to believe that there's a trustee that puts in more than maybe 5 to 10 hours a week on a consistent basis. Maybe some weeks more, some weeks less. But I'm still entitled to full healthcare coverage on a part-time job.
Wow. That
the taxpayer picks up the bill for. That didn't sit well with me.
No, that's crazy.
Especially when we talked about the numbers, right? Like a family healthcare plan, for anyone is pushing $30,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is nothing.
That is so insane when you think about that.
Well, think about it. For elected officials, if they're all taking that, and I don't know what other townships.
Sure.
Well, actually, I do. I did some work on that when I was. So the Ohio Revised Code spells it out such that if a township offers healthcare to its employees, the elected officials have to have a plan that's on level, right? Now, my belief is that the reason they put that in place is so that elected officials couldn't give themselves a nice plan and screw over the employees.
Makes sense.
But what winds up happening is, well, if I give a great healthcare plan to the employees of the township, then I get a great healthcare plan.
Right.
And I do think that the employees we talked about it, the ones that's their full-time job. Yeah. I mean, that's where most people get their healthcare is through their full-time jobs, but we all had healthcare before we presumably we all had healthcare before we got into this realm. And I looked at it as a standpoint of, I mean, a perfect example is in Lafayette, we have, a plan that's roughly $30,000. If you have 4 elected officials that are taking it, that's $120,000 a year. Well, we could buy a new ambulance every 3 to 4 years if we all just
Gave up the healthcare.
Right. And it's not even necessarily about just doing that. I mean, one of the things that I've been working on here recently is again, because this is all legal. So, I mean, it's not like there's anything that's illegal about doing this. But, one of the options that we have as elected officials is instead of opting into the healthcare plan, we could reimburse ourselves or any employee that works at the township if they were to purchase or have healthcare elsewhere. Well, when I came in as being self-employed, I have my own private healthcare plan for my family. And I could submit that bill to the township and they could reimburse it. Well, it's significantly less than if I were to get on the township's plan. Because it's a plan that works for me. It's not, a plan that's necessarily what the township is. So that would be a way that we could save money. There are some townships that go to like a cash in lieu of benefits program that's also authorized with the code. And it says that like, look, any employee that's eligible to healthcare that wants to go get their own, we pay them 25% of what the plan is, it's just in cash. But you save 75% of the cost to the taxpayer.
Right.
And so it all came into, when you're spending other people's money, it's a lot easier to just be like, I'm not going to put in the work. I'm not going to look at other alternatives. The money was in the budget. It's not like they're not bankrupting the township doing it. It's just that
it's not broke. We're not going to try and fix it.
Right.
On
There's
the next.
Right. Exactly. So I just think that there's a lot of things that we can do to, change the incentive structure. As it stands right now, the way that the township's healthcare plan is set up, you'd be crazy not to take it. So
yeah,
I'm the crazy one, but it is. And so it's not about necessarily chastising the people that do it, but just like, maybe there's a better way for us to solve this problem, provide the solutions that our employees deserve, and be a little bit more fair with the taxpayer. Because I don't know anywhere else you can go get a part-time job and get full medical coverage.
Are there term limits?
No.
So you can be in this position for the rest of your life, potentially.
Well, depending on who you talk to, might not be that long, but
you guys at 2.5 is that your guys' budget?
Our budget
said $6 million at the top of the episode.
Actually, hold on.
For Montville or
for Lafayette. It says they manage a $6 million budget. That's what we said at the top.
3.2 of that. Well, hold on. 3.2 is on the township side. 3.3 is the fire district. We do not get compensated off the fire district because it's a separate political subdivision.
Gotcha.
So our compensation is off of 3.2. I actually brought it. I figured you guys might ask.
Yeah, Grok told me that Montville's 6.7 revenues, mostly because of property taxes.
So for next year, the trustees that are in office, depending on the budget of the township, is at the lowest level. If your budget's $250,000 or less, so we're talking a tiny township, your salary would be $9,284. For any township with a budget over $10 million, which I believe Montville is going to be.
Yeah, I'm trying to look. I think that's what I was asking. Are you guys at 2.57 budget?
Well, it goes off of the certificate of resources, so it gets a little bit goofy because this
is total budget expenditures appropriations.
So that's what you're going to spend. So
that's what you're going to spend,
right? So
I understand this a little bit better, maybe.
Here.
So that's what you're going to spend based off of everything that you've kind of already
Yeah, let's ask the human being, not the AI.
So that's what we get from the county every year. That's the certificate of resources. And that'll show you in the far left column, that is how much money we're going to that's what we're projecting to start the year with.
Basically.
Correct. And then the next column will be our tax revenue. from property taxes than any other revenue source
So
that we
like
might
grants
have.
or things like
Yep.
that.
Or, some of the bigger stuff like Wadsworth has their own utilities and stuff like that. So they've got money that comes in from that would be included. Some of the
Gotcha.
some of the villages actually have it. So that number there in the bottom right,
Yeah.
that's what's considered our budget for our compensation and stuff.
Gotcha.
So
this number right here, because that has the money that's already in the bank,
Mhm.
this money is already spoken for or not already spoken
Nope.
for. So this is extra cash.
That's money that's extra cash. That's what we're planning
This
to
is-
start next year because the tax revenues don't start coming in until usually we might get some advances in March. But so you have to have money to start the beginning of the next year.
Right,
You
yeah.
can't pay your bills, you
Sure.
can't pay your salaries and stuff like that.
So you always have that rollover
Correct.
figured in. And then your new income. Okay. Want to see that?
But what's interesting about that is my compensation as an elected official. If I tax you more, if I don't spend the money on services and just build my bank account, those are all things that can increase my salary. But
Really?
those actually don't necessarily benefit you.
Yeah.
So and that's not to say that I think that there are tons of elected officials out there that necessarily do that.
Well, because you would get hopefully called out right off the rip, but who knows if nobody's paying attention.
Right. And so we had previous administrations, even before any of the people that are currently serving now. A perfect example of, I think, was a responsible decision making was when the bond was, because the idea is look, the bigger the budget you manage, the more work it is.
Right.
Kind of a double-edged sword, because if you've got a big enough budget, you can hire a lot of people to do a lot of your work. But, when the fire safety service building was built and it significantly upped, the certificate, because we're bringing in all this money, the previous administration had opted to exclude that from their salary calculation. That was before we had some issues with splitting. Now it's completely out because the entire fire district doesn't count, but that's a 2-hour podcast in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, so again, it's just another example of kind of where sometimes the incentives don't match up with what you're actually looking for. Not that I
Or
know that
what you should expect.
Right.
Right. It's not a performance metrics in a good way for
Right.
the people you serve.
or like we talked about, you're saving up for a big purchase.
Right.
So if I'm saving up for a big purchase and all of a sudden it bumps me into the next earning category, it's like I'm actually just hoarding cash. I'm not actually doing any more work than I was doing before. So why am I getting
paid more. Right.
paid more?
Yeah, that's insane.
So, but the whole compensation structure is a little bit challenging because, like I said, I don't think if you asked most trustees how much time they put in, and then you figured out what they made on an hourly basis, again, everybody could probably find a better paying job somewhere else. But then the insurance piece of it is where things get a little bit hairy sometimes, and that's something that Columbus is probably going to have to figure out is, how to fix the compensation structure, to compensate people fairly for their work without creating I did an analysis of what, based on the certificates of resources of the whole county, like what all the elected officials in the townships, all 17 townships did. And roughly two thirds of the township, based on the public records request that I did, about 2/3 of the township elected officials have access to healthcare through their townships that they work for. The 2/3 healthcare cost was a bigger number than all of the salaries.
Wow.
And some townships were significant. I mean, there were elected officials, and this was all based off of last year's numbers, but there were elected officials that were collecting $50,000 worth of benefits because of the way their plans were structured. And I would say that to those, if you're in the highest income bracket, based on the size of this, some of those trustees might, with benefits, be earning almost $80,000 a year. Now they're definitely fairly more than fairly compensated in my mind. But but it's all legal. It's the way that Columbus has set up the rules for the elected officials. So that's where it comes back to.
Who's going to hold them accountable?
Exactly, and it's going to have to be the voters, because at the end of the day, and I think that's where it gets muddy, right? Is when a township, when when a constituency starts to pay attention, and when you have, trustees that don't necessarily agree on exactly what's the way to hold each other accountable, right? There's a lot of townships where it's like, I'll pick on Montville a little bit. They do 2 meetings a month, but they do one at 1:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, I believe. Who's going to a meeting at 1:00? I mean, but the county commissioners do the same thing. 9:30 every Tuesday.
Yeah.
How many people do you think that they get to show up and talk to them?
Yeah, middle of the workday. So, speaking of accountability and constituents and everything, so Lafayette has an election coming up here right now. We're seeing the signs everywhere. So, how do you see that playing out?
I'm just looking forward to being over.
Yeah. No predictions?
No, absolutely not. You've got. Well, I'll make one prediction. We have one candidate running for fiscal officer, and she will win that seat.
Is it too late to put our name in for Evan over here?
It's like it's when my neighbor ran for sheriff, and I was like,
you can definitely.
Terry had nobody going against him. I was like,
I don't even know if you can register as a write-in anymore, but maybe. But no, I mean, here's the thing. I think to me, it's always tough. Because there are, like I said, I mean, you watch the meetings. We're always there's a lot of talk about how much animosity there is or how much disagreement there is, but ultimately at the end of the day, we I'd say probably 90+% of the votes are still
pretty
3-0. Because most stuff is administrative, or it's you work to a point to get it to the point where it's a 3-0 vote, right? And a lot of it is just procedural approving it. And it's just the acknowledgement that all 3 elected officials have reviewed it and it's accurate.
Right.
And then there are a handful of things that we disagree on. I think.
Is there anything currently right now that you guys are deadlocked on that you've recently voted on?
Recently voted on that we're deadlocked on. Well, we did disagree on the newsletter. We send out of all things, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's one of those ones where in today's day and age, we talked about it, right? Like who subscribes to the newspaper, right? And people don't tend to get that a lot. And I think so many people, we just spent, like $3,500 last year. And then this year it's going to be $4,500 for next year, $4,700, on really putting a lot of, energy and effort into the township website. One of the things that's coming for everybody is Columbus in their infinite wisdom,
Body cameras. Oh,
no. Actually, that would be fairly interesting, though. We could get some good footage. But
yeah.
The websites all have to be ADA compliant.
Gotcha.
And I think we have a number of years to get up to speed with that.
Oh, ADA for hearing and
hearing, colors,
vision.
Font, like it's crazy the amount of stuff that's in there. So it's like, instead of trying to hire somebody that can do that, we went with Civic Plus, a service that will do that for us. And one of the main things was we had an issue where we were using a .com, for the website, which a lot of people do, but we had some ownership issues, and there's a lot of security pushes on getting everybody that's a government entity to a .gov website. Medina County actually just did it. They switched all of their stuff to medinacounty.gov. And so we spent a ton of money on doing that, and we brought the website up to snuff, and there's a lot of information that's on there, and we can push out all the stuff on there. So spending, $3,500, $4,500 twice a year to mail a piece out, to me just seemed waste, right?
100% waste.
And look, it's campaign season. It's nice to throw something in everybody's mailbox with your face on it. It's easy for me to say that it's a stupid idea when I'm not the one that's on the ballot. But at the end of the day, like I said before, our biggest there's just so many things. $4,000 twice a year, $8,000 a year, 4 year, 4 years in office. That's like $32,000. I mean, there's all kinds of better things I think that we can do with that money. And so that was one of the things that we disagreed on. But I mean, it wasn't like there were no fist fights or tables thrown or anything like that. So,
I'm blown away at as much as I just learned about freaking local politics tonight.
So we have to ask, because we did watch the videos.
Yeah.
what do you want to tell us about the cameras story? Like, it's just all entertainment
Jesus.
for us, but
there's a couple of different camera stories. So which one are
the only I'm butchering this, but I know from watching the one episode you had the guy from Wadsworth show
Matt
up
Ray.
and yeah. So it wasn't your first interaction with this guy, obviously.
No, unfortunately. Well, I mean, look, I won't get too deep into that one, but allegedly not allegedly, because there were cameras that were installed at the township back in 2016. So, I mean, I think I had just been appointed to the BZA, but I had absolutely no, obviously, decision-making authority or anything along those lines, was completely unaware of it. And somewhere along the lines, some invoices popped up that apparently listed my parents' home address as having been where those bills were sent. But there are
where the bills were sent or where the cameras were sent?
The bills were sent. There was never any questions over, at least as far as I've seen, there were never any questions over where the cameras were sent. The cameras that I believe are in question were installed in what's now the service garage, what was the old fire department. Why they were there, again, was not part of the decision-making process of that. Did not even know that was done at the time. That wasn't, obviously in the purview of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I can't really speak on any of that. And the first that I ever saw of those, or heard of these invoices that were supposedly for the cameras, was actually Mr. Ray sent me a Facebook message. I want to say it was in early 2023, alluding to them surfacing allegedly 7 years after.
So these weren't just
this wasn't a camera system that was put up at your house. They're not
Absolutely
saying.
not.
He's saying that you paid to have cameras put up at the
I don't know if the allegation is that I paid to put them up or if somehow I was involved in a cover up but the thing that's crazy about all of it is the cameras that were invoiced, there's perfect documentation of when the check was written to pay for them. The only thing that's in question is what's the paper invoice? Like is that invoice the actual invoice that was submitted at the time? Or, again, like I said, it didn't appear until sometime in 2023. So you would think an invoice that had a discrepancy like that would, especially that was all the time of the Brian Macron stuff, so you would think that an invoice that was that.
What's the Brian Macron stuff?
That's the trustee who is no longer alive.
Do you really live in Medina County?
I do.
Yeah.
Have you ever been on the internet?
What was that? What was?
He's the one that was found in Chippewa Lake.
Yeah.
Oh, that was some time ago.
That was in 2016.
Early 2017 is when he was found. He went missing in December of 2016, which I think is why those invoices or the cameras are kind of question, and those are all valid questions.
Sure.
But this invoice stuff.
Oh, I remember that.
So the cameras, these obviously were not like just like trail cameras. These were cameras that were actually installed like in the fire department building.
Correct. If I understand correctly, they were like supposed to be like secret surveillance type cameras that, the story, again, this is just what I've heard, right? Is that they were for there were concerns over equipment being damaged or going missing. Again,
because there was also other stuff in that parking lot, like the salt trucks and all that stuff are in that parking lot. But
if I understand correctly, these were all internal cameras. I don't think any of the surveillance, which is why.
Inside the building.
They were inside the building.
Oh, okay.
Right. So they were, again, all secondhand information, but they were all recording like the equipment that was in the building. So even if those cameras, had recorded anything on the evening of in question, from what's been reported, they wouldn't have picked up anything on the exterior of any of the buildings or anything down at the administration building. So to me, it seems like it's a lot of noise about nothing. Just to try to
understand
draw.
Definitely made for an interesting 13 minutes on the during the 3-hour meeting. Though I was like, what is this guy talking about? And then it's like everyone's like, well, check your Facebook and I'm like, what is going on? I was like, these things are interesting. I'm gonna have to start going.
Yeah.
But
Good
yeah.
reality TV going on there locally.
Well, now that you've learned all about township governance, you need to start attending the Montville
I'm
meetings
already on it.
and then maybe throw your hat in
Oh, I don't know
in 2
about
years.
that. I don't know about that. We'll see. The last thing I need to be in charge is the county's money. We'd have sidewalks all the way up Route 3. I tell you that right now, though.
Yeah, and then your vehicle versus person injuries would go up 1,000,000%.
It would not.
It would. You
It's
know how many?
safer than how many people walk down the street?
No.
That's
That's
all right.
not how it would work.
ODOT
The
would never
trucks,
let him do that anyway.
The
What,
trucks
put a
would be.
sidewalk down the road.
Yeah,
It's a state highway.
State 3, Route 3 is
It's
yeah.
a state highway.
So does it stop at 162 then? It's not a state highway anymore?
As
There's a
long as it
sideway
has
on-
the number 3 on it, it is
so
a
then
state
there's
highway.
Sidewalks that go all the way into town. Those are all state highways.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That section, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
right in
See,
front
there
of
you go.
McDonald's.
And there's
sidewalk.
your campaign platform too.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
building sidewalks
Sidewalks.
everywhere. We're going to promote exercise and healthy lifestyles. Everybody's going to walk to school.
How are you paying for those?
Taxpayers' money.
Oh yeah, so you want the people to vote for you to spend more money on shit they're never going to use.
It's the benefit.
The benefit of what?
Having a sidewalk.
Your political career just ended before it even
I'm telling you
started,
now,
right there.
People, the value exceeds the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd rather pay for sidewalks than a school levy. I could
Who
tell
is
you
your
that.
campaign manager? Kamala Harris?
I was gonna say that might work in a blue city.
Hey, you know what? Actually, I did want to bring up one last question,
Yeah.
and we'll end this for the night. The oil thing that happened with the school when they brought in all the oil companies,
Nexus.
laid all the pipe and Nexus and all that. Did that benefit the school pretty substantially? I know that for a while they were like no school supplies charges and stuff like that. Are they still doing any of that?
I know that there was a benefit. There was a bunch of pushback on the valuation. Nexus fought the valuation. We actually, even the townships that were affected, and Lafayette was one that was impacted a little bit more than some of the others. Should start seeing some additional money from that now that they've got some of the legal battle over that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the schools saw that was a big part of what allowed Cloverleaf to pursue all of the improvements that they made, consolidating the middle school and the high school.
I figured that was a big
you know,
part
to
of that
be
aspect.
able to do that.
'Cause
Yeah,
it had to be a ton of money.
It wound up coming in less than. Well, again, the last I heard, it had been less than what they had originally expected because, again, Nexus fought the valuation, and so they got that kind of rolled back a little bit. So the school didn't get quite as much money as they had hoped that they were going to get. But it seems like it came in higher than what it could have too. So,
Gotcha.
but yeah, it's definitely helped the schools.
Awesome. All right, you got anything else?
Man, well, we enjoyed having you here.
Yeah,
it was a
absolutely.
blast, dude. Absolutely.
Anytime
man.
you
I
guys want
appreciate
to do it again, I mean,
it. Right down
I'm
the
not
street,
sure if
man.
anybody will. We'll see how many views you get.
You know, it's not even about the views. It's more about learning stuff, and then eventually people start to catch on and stuff like that. But if anything, I think they could have learned a little bit more about you tonight, and then
Hopefully.
even myself learning a little bit more about city government.
And the biggest thing, you said it probably halfway through the episode, is like getting people like off of, I mean, we're obviously big social media people, but a big part of that is like, whether it's for a couple hours or a day or a couple of days, when you can disconnect from it and just sit down at a table and just bullshit about things. And then, there's the same thing. Like, we learned a lot tonight, and, hopefully everybody else that's watching along is learning about it too. It's important, and it's something that you can control. I get the national landscape. We talk about the things you vote for there. I mean, right now, today, as we're recording this, our government is shut down because our elected officials, are filibustering their way through trying to figure out how to spend the money we have no control over, contributing to, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to local elections, your voice, I mean, it's miles. It goes a lot more miles than it does on a national level, for sure.
How many elected officials can you pick up the phone
Yeah, right.
and actually call and have a decent chance of actually getting them on the phone, right?
Well, we know
And-
one.
That's right.
And then on top of it, I think your point is perfect too, because there are so many people that you get into a disagreement with online, and it can spiral on any social media. But then you get a chance to sit down with somebody, and the tone just changes completely. And even if you don't walk away, changing your opinion, you wind up gaining some understanding of like at least where the other person's coming from. And it's just.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to make a comment about that earlier on, in that So I'm pretty neutral when it comes to video content, but when it comes to my personal Facebook page, it's like it's a little bit of a war zone because I tend to just like to put things out there to provoke conversation. But I found that I have to be.
Is that even a like phrase? Provoke conversation.
That's
Sounds
basically
more
what
like provoke war. But
So funny enough, I was just about to
engagement,
say
maybe provoke engagement.
Funny enough, I was just about to say that now when I'm putting comments on there, I have to be very careful with proofreading what I say there because people tend to grab one little thing that you say or type. Man, we just, Your Honor, I rest my case right here. I could have said it earlier with
provoke.
But anyway, so I now like triple proofread what I put there because what happens is there's people that don't even really want to argue your point. They're just looking for a typo. And then they want to go put the magnifying glass on that and say, oh, well, so you can't even type correctly because you said in and you should have said on.
We get into these arguments, right? And it always becomes a personal thing. And it becomes you're an idiot, or I don't like you for this, or you did this, or you did that, instead of discussing the ideas. And that's ultimately what we should all, we're all guilty of it, but that's what we should all be striving for is that's how we move anything forward, is discussing ideas, not people.
Right.
Not the personal stuff.
Yeah.
And
or the name calling, or, you're this tribe and so you're this way, et cetera. Yeah. Just sit down and have a conversation.
Doesn't take much.
Provoke discussion.
Or create engagement, maybe.
Provoke discussion.
Like such a more neutral way of saying that. Provoke
discussion.
Sounds like you're trying to poke the bear.
Provoke.
I'm going to steal that though.
Discussion.
I'm not controversial. I'm just creating engagement.
See, creating engagement. See, everybody's smiling right now.
Yeah.
We're all just thinking about sidewalks in 2028. Vote for Kewen. Awesome. Well, hey, dude, appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for
really
having me.
appreciate you sharing all that you have. If anybody's still paying attention or watching, please comment with any questions you got below. We'll get them to them and get some interesting feedback, I'm sure, off of local media groups. Hopefully they enjoy the conversation and getting a little bit of feedback and insight into you as well. So appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Awesome. Good night, everybody.
Night.
With words soars through the air, every point sharp and every talk fair. Knights at the round table, come and pull up a chair. Join the brotherhood, words laid bare. Protect and provide, we're knights in the fray. Nothing off limits, we got something to say.